like we're at 7 o'clock. We'll call this meeting to order. First order of business is public comments. And do we have anyone signed up right now? Is there a student government report?
Good evening. I have several events. So this year's prom will be held at the Keene Country Club on Saturday, May 5th. This year's theme will be Hollywood. Tickets have gone on sale this week, and I would like to thank the class of 2019 for their hard work in designing this year's prom. Last week, middle and high school were asked to attend an assembly on drug awareness. The guest speaker for the assembly was an officer from the Swansea Police Department. The topics that were covered included addiction and alcoholism. This Friday, Monadnock will be holding a pep rally as a celebration for the upcoming break. I would like to thank Tom Pouliot and Tally Messenger for organizing the event with Mr. Cody. And lastly, students have began studying for AP exams that will be held in May. And these students have worked very hard, and I wish them the best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Beamish. Seeing that we don't have any other public comments, why don't we invite up the students from Destination Imagination? We'd love to hear from you.
I'm not the student from Destination Imagination, but
That's all right, Mr.
this is my annual opportunity to brag about our kids, and I always love to take advantage of that. This year we had 3 teams again, and they were outstanding kids, as usual. One team was all brand new kids who had never done the program before, and they took on the structure challenge, came within 2 points of coming into second place. The other team was a technical team that has had a little bit more experience and is still trying to learn the debilitating nature of procrastination. But they still, even in spite of that, came within 6 points of taking second place this year. And both very good jobs. And in fact, that second team took the top scores in what we call the instant challenge. And then our third team were these guys, the improv kids. And they had to do a challenge this year where they had to research explorers from around the world. They had to research different cultures. They had to research what could you do with a blanket, a sheet, a bed sheet, to create props. They had to prepare themselves to have a variety of different really oddball scenarios thrown at them. And then in the midst of all this, once they had that planned, they had a curveball thrown at them. There was a setback they had to deal with in the midst of putting together a scene that lasted, 7 minutes? 5 minutes. They had to do all this in 5 minutes. So now these guys are going to be representing New Hampshire at the Destination Imagination Global Finals down in Tennessee in May, at the end of May again. And like I said, I love to brag about these guys, and I'd like to have them come forward and tell you a little bit about what the program has meant for them.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Peters. With our team today, we have Molly Robinson, Brianne Swanson, Olivia Stanley, and Colin Ellsworth. Sadly, Tally Messenger could not make it tonight. Colin, Olivia, Tally, and I had the opportunity to go down to the Global Finals in Tennessee last year, and it was a life-changing experience. We had the opportunity to meet people from all over the world and discuss different solutions that they had posed for our challenges, or maybe different challenges that we didn't have the opportunity to take part in. We met people, we talked about different cultures. I met a team from Poland. I'm still in contact with them. I'm still good friends with one of them. And it's just a life-changing experience. And if anybody else would like to come on.
So I'm Olivia Stanley. So one thing that DI has taught me was teamwork. So every time we'd receive our score reports back, we'd get these outstanding scores in teamwork. And we were just like such a great group of friends. And the amount of teamwork for this challenge is insane. Like, we have to all be responsible for each explorer, but we all have to know about each explorer as well. So we have to inform each other and talk about things and talk things through. And it's just like a really great opportunity to become close with each other. And it's just a really great program to teach kids about responsibility and creativity and innovative thinking. And anyone else?
So DI has taught me about some very important academic skills, one of which being research and the importance that it plays in being prepared for your academic courses. DI goes for the same thing, like we had to research all these cultures and these explorers, same as you would study for a math test or a science test. And I believe that DI has really helped me with my studying skills, my preparation abilities, and my ability to efficiently do this and help myself in my academic courses.
Hi, I'm Molly Robinson. I am a freshman here, and this DI has given me such a huge opportunity to be social with others because I didn't talk to people the whole time. And this has given me a lot of confidence. It's a great way for me to learn more about just a bunch of different things that I never thought I would even need to know. But I've learned a whole ton about different cultures, different people, different explorers. And I've learned a lot about problem solving, how to improvise and just think things over and to calm myself down before trying to approach an issue. And all the people on this team are just amazing people, and I am very grateful to have been part of this. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brianne Swanson, and one thing that I have had the opportunity to learn this year is there are no limits to the amount of solutions that you can find to a single problem. With all of the different variations of cultures and explorers that we've had in each practice scene that we've done, we have learned so many different ways to do things, and I feel like that's a really valuable lesson that I'm going to take through my future in college and medical school. There are so many opportunities to I have no idea what I was saying. To grow. To grow.
So one thing that a few of us have spoken about is, especially Bree, is the amount of ways you can create one solution and the way that you can use that solution to communicate and grow with the people in your team. So when we do something called an instant challenge, essentially we are given a challenge and all of the rules are given to us right then and there, and we have never seen anything about this challenge prior to walking in the room. Sometimes we will have to make a skit or something, or maybe we will have to build a structure to carry something or move something across a room. I remember one of the first instant challenges that we did with Mr. Kuhn earlier in the year is we had to, there was about a 4x4 grid of different colors and shapes. So like a red circle, a yellow triangle, a blue square, whatever. And we had to take nothing but wooden dowels and completely silently from across the room tell the rest of our team in what order the shapes and colors were appearing. So we devised a system as a team of, okay, this position of the dowels means this shape, and then we will do a symbol or something for the color. This challenge has, I've really thought about this a lot over the course of this year, and how, because I feel like we had really great communication in that challenge. And I felt like if we can repeat the communication skills that we used in that challenge throughout the rest of the year, we can make it to the globals, and that's exactly what we did. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you. So I'm sorry, I didn't ask the board if you had any questions for the teams or Mr. Kuhn. Did anyone want me to call them back up so you can ask a question? No. It is tradition for us to honor the teams. Of course, we provide funding for them to attend the globals. That's not inexpensive. They will need our help. So we'll be looking for a motion along those lines, and it is a tradition for us to also provide jackets or a ring or something of their choosing of a specific value as well. What is the will of the board? Would you like to deal with that now or later on in the meeting?
Let's do it now.
Yeah. Well, then we would like to hear a motion.
All right, so I guess the couple motions here. First one would be for the jackets or the rings or some other recognition. And I think for other sports, it's $75. Is that
I think
right?
that's right.
That's what we've traditionally done, yes.
So I'd make a motion to, I think we call it swag, right?
That's right. Local term.
And I'm sorry, who was the second for that?
Second.
Good. So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you very much. You've got 2 abstentions from Eric and Scott.
Yep.
Okay. And the second motion for funding, I think first we need to ask, what sort of funding would be required for something like this? And what have we done traditionally?
As you said, it's pricey.
Want to have them come to the,
Sure.
excuse me?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
For the sake of the cameras, thank you.
I understand. I know I've got a loud enough voice where you could hear me, but my face doesn't come over this far. It's going to cost us. This year, the plane tickets were ridiculous compared to what we've paid in the past. Right now, what we're looking at is a total of about $14,000 for the whole team to go. This is for the entire week from Monday through Sunday. Which if you break it down on a per day basis for what they're getting, it's not bad, but it's a big chunk of change.
I'm sorry if you said this, but what is the location of Globals this year?
The University of Tennessee at Knoxville. And generally, right now, what we've got in our account is about $3,000. We've done a major fundraiser with Jersey Mike's, which we're estimating will be another $3,000. So that gets us to about almost halfway there. And we do have a number of other fundraisers that we have in the works to help us along.
Last year, I looked back to your minutes, and there were 2 teams that went to Globals, and you had made a motion to, or approved for them to each get $3,000.
Okay.
Are there any other questions?
How many teams are going this year?
Just one this time.
Just one?
Yeah. We decided to take it a little easy.
Which account do we draw these funds from?
I don't remember where I saw that.
No, I'm not sure where we've drawn it from in the past.
From the school board account?
I would have to go look it up. I'm not quite sure.
Do you recall from having looked at it what the balance was in that account?
I do not recall.
Because you don't remember which account it was.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm still coming up to speed on everything, but I had looked back at your minutes and what you had approved on that, but I'm not certain which account.
Okay. Sherry.
What's your fundraising deadline?
We have to have our reservation made, which means we've got to have at least $1,500 in by Friday, the 20th.
This Friday.
This Friday, yeah. So we would have to be sending the check in as soon as possible.
And then by when would you have to have the balance of
The
your
balance we can pay off when we get there. So that would be May 21st.
But you had to pay for plane tickets in advance.
We had to pay, right, the plane ticket money. I'm assuming that between what we raised and what we're getting from Jersey Mike's, that'll cover the plane tickets. So we've got to handle the registration, which covers room and board. And we've got to handle, there's a bus transfer. Because we're flying into Nashville instead of Knoxville, there's a bus that will pick us up there and bring us back to the Nashville airport. And that's going to cost us about $90 a piece for that transfer.
Lisa.
I'm certain that we can locate either a line or 2 lines and make some budget balance transfers to cover whatever the board deems is appropriate.
Okay. I think what I just heard is that we have 2 more board meetings before we know how much you've been able to raise on your own.
True.
Yeah. So that's a piece of information we might take into consideration as we make the motion this evening. Betty?
I'd like to make a motion to extend $3,000 $3,000 to the team, with the understanding that if they get down to the last board meeting and they still don't have enough money to come back to us, because we don't know what the fundraisers are going to do.
Okay.
Second.
All right, so I heard $3,000 now. Come back to us if you haven't raised all of the appropriate money.
That's very generous.
By the
Thank you.
second board meeting in May, okay?
Okay, thank you.
That's the second, I'm sorry, that's the third Tuesday in May. All right. Is there any discussion on this? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Are there any abstentions? That would be Scott and Eric.
Thank you all so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck. Good luck.
Very good. Now we're moving on to the motion to consolidate Cutler students into the Mount Caesar campus. This was brought to us at the meeting that we had at Emerson. And I think, Brian, this was your motion, correct?
Correct.
All right. So I'll let you start with a little bit of an explanation and then restate your motion and we'll follow with discussion.
You know, to, I think, start, one of the reasons why I made the amendment to the original motion, you know, one, you know, loud and clear, I heard concerns that there were many in the district that were, you know, had some thoughts about everyone coming to one single location, especially, you know, children, you know, kindergarten, first grade, in that age group. So, you know, in Rob speaking, you know, about, you know, what we are trying to do as far as, you know, a common goal, you know, most, I won't speak for everyone, but, you know, my feeling has been, I think, pretty well known. You know, our schools are aging to the point where, you know, membership is down, you know, buildings are structurally, we're struggling to maintain at the cost that we're, you know, proposing right now. So, you know, my feeling is that if we're trying to find a solution, both to people who are concerned about cost and people that maybe are both or only singularly, you know, concerned about quality of the physical structure, this is maybe somewhere in the middle, right? We're looking at a solution for the southern schools, possibly, you know, and consolidating schools, I think, is not without some cause for concern and conversation. So I think that's where we start.
Thank you very much. And who was the second for this motion? Do we remember? It was Rob? Okay. Is there any discussion on this motion? Neil?
I would think this should go to finance. There's a lot of issues here. A lot of pros and cons. There's been 6 different motions put forward on what we should do, from just let's build an elementary school to this latest one about let's move Cutler over. There's a whole bunch of pros, a whole bunch of cons. They all need a lot of work. And I think the work ought to be done. If this motion passes, I would assume that this is the motion that in January will go on the warrant with no background. So I would encourage everybody to move this to finance. I'll make that motion.
All right.
Second that
so
motion.
That would be a motion to table, correct? Because we already have a motion on the floor.
Oh, you want me to make a motion to table instead?
So if we're going to send it to finance, then it would be a motion to refer to committee then, okay. And you did have a second for a motion to refer to committee?
Still gonna have discussion.
Yeah, we're still gonna have discussion. Was there a second to refer it to committee?
Yeah, Winston.
Yeah.
Winston did.
Second.
Okay. So let's discuss referring it to committee then. Yes.
So, I think it's on the agenda tonight, but there's 2 things that come to mind, and it definitely needs a lot of study. I would definitely agree with Neil in terms of what this project looks like, right? Scope and all that type of stuff. But I think in large part, it's in our best interest to have, people do this for a living. In terms of study this stuff and make a recommendation based on the parameters we give them. So, well, I think we definitely need more attention to it. And I think there's some expertise that we lack to at least study all of the variables, whether it be declining or increasing or stable population, whether it be cost of renovation, building, all of those things. So that, my idea would be to find someone or some group that eventually could take this from a professional management standpoint and give us a professional recommendation with whatever parameters we decide to give them. The second thing I worry about is this is going to go to committee, and a lot of really good work gets done at committee, but it gets repeated right back here in front of the open board. So if it's going to go to committee and then come back and we're going to have the same conversation, why don't we just have that conversation in open forum, in a full board meeting? Until we, again, I know it's a subject later, but until we rectify the purpose and the mission of a committee under our structure, I would vote, I would struggle to be referring it to committee.
Referring to committee, Neil's motion is to refer to the Finance Committee, but if we're going to ask the committees to do work on this topic, I would think the Education Committee has a matching amount.
Anyone else?
I think regarding a professional group to address it, we already paid for the NESDEC report, which we have, in my opinion, never spent any time discussing to do that. So if we want to refer back to, a report that we already paid somebody to do a fair amount of research with, the report did say we have too much real estate. We maintain too many buildings, right? This, is not meant to pit town versus town. I'm a Swansea rep recommending that we close one of the Swansea schools to do that, right? I believe it's cost effective. I think it makes sense. It offers educational opportunity, having, more collaboration within grade level. I agree with Rob. We have a chance to have a conversation as a board that needs to happen. And I'm not one for referring it to committee because it lengthens the conversation. And in my honest opinion, we haven't taken a lot of action on anything that has come back from committee. We struggle with even voting on policy right now.
So I do have a question. What is it that we as a full board could accomplish before actually voting on this? Because we could go round and round in circles. We could come right back to this with no further information and still vote this up or down. We could have a vote right now, up or down, and effectively close one of our schools. That could happen tonight. But that doesn't seem like the will of the board. So let's talk about what else we want to do before we actually vote on this. Nick.
I think it's a little bit vague in what we're motion to consolidate Cutler students into the Mount Caesar campus. That can mean a lot of different things. Does it mean over a period of time? Does it mean in a single year? Does it mean that we add small expansions on? Does it mean that we tear down the existing school and build a whole new school? Does it mean that we do one large expansion and do it in 1 year? So I think there's a lot of different things that can mean, and we should be more precise if we're going to make a motion like this.
So to define a scope?
Yeah.
Is that something that would happen in committee?
Honestly, on the committee side of that, I wasn't going to comment on it, but I feel the same way as Rob does when, concerning committees. I think we get some things done in committee, like, policy maybe, things like that, finance when we're working on the budget for the year, specific topics in education that we discuss. But when it comes to really big subjects, I don't see them that need constant attention, not just once a month. Especially if you're going to have a meeting that's canceled and then it's 2 months before you even talk about something. So if we're going to tackle something as large as this, I would like to see, and especially talking to the point that you made, where it needs to be addressed by education, by finance. I got all those people here, so we can either have separate committee meetings where they're not in the same room and not comparing notes, or you can have everybody in the same room. It's going to mean lengthy board meetings at night, but let's do it in the board meeting if we're going to do something big like this.
All right, Scott?
I can see the passion and also the wisdom of all of us being involved in the conversation and not referring it to committee, but if we were to take that path, I would suggest that we carve out a special meeting to do it, because when we try to fit it in to everything else we're trying to do in an agenda, I think part of what happens is we come in here, we're not ready to have this conversation in its full breadth. And so to set up a room, grab the whiteboard, grab a projector, be able to grab data quickly and be able to focus on it in like a working session atmosphere, all 13 of us would, do as good.
And that would have to be a posted meeting open to the public as well. Betty?
I think the last time we discussed this, Wynn had mentioned that the motion should be broader and should encompass the whole district, not just the town of Swansea.
Okay. Winston?
I think we got to think about this before we make motions, because we're hitting the town that aren't with Swansea with a immediate action. They're going to close my school, they're going to relocate it, they're going to change the setups. We need to do a lot of work before this. And right now, I think this should be a year-long discussion. Come up with a plan if you're going to do it for next year. And I agree that a lot more information can come when you do the whole committee together, but it takes longer to get the answer that night or the next night or the next week. Because you've got 13 people that will weigh in. You've got selectmen in all the towns that are going to weigh in. You've got the budget committees of this district in the schools that are going to weigh in. And we have no plan to show them. And we need to come up with priorities. What is our priority now? Is it the building and changing the school direction? Or is it something else, like trying to solve the formula? If we could get that solved, we'd have a lot better chance to for a building program of any type. That isn't solved yet. And it's going to come up again. And I very strongly feel that if we don't get that straightened out to a satisfaction, you might as well stop talking about a new school and let Swansea build their own.
All right. Any other comment? So we're sitting on two motions right now, but we will address Neil's motion first, which is to send it to committee. If we decide as a board to send it to finance, that does not mean that we can't have a second motion to simultaneously send it over to education. So does everyone feel ready to vote on Neil's motion to send this to finance? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We'll have to do a roll call for that.
Kristen?
Yes.
Wynn?
Yes.
Neil?
Yep.
Nick?
No.
Brian?
No.
Rob?
No.
Sherry?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Betty?
No.
Scott?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
7.543 yes. 3.577 no.
All right. So this motion will go to finance committee. I can entertain a motion to send it to a separate committee at the same time if anyone would like.
Make that motion
Yeah. To which one?
to refer to education committee.
Education.
I'd second it.
All right. Is there any, that was Winston with the second. Yeah, Brian.
Well, I am disappointed with the first vote. I would like to set a date that committees come back to the board with some discussion and some information, because I think, doing it this way, we potentially end up never having a conversation in front of the board for the entire year.
Okay. All right. Anyone else? Discussion.
I think
Patty,
that the
yeah.
committees are going to have to alter their schedule. Once a month isn't going to do it. So I would think that finance and education will going to have to step it up for a while.
Okay. Very good. Neil?
Well, Karen's not here because her car's broke down, but she thought that we'd probably take more meetings. And finance is supposed to report their status every meeting. They come here, so you should get a report every 2 weeks, right?
Right. Scott?
For both committees, what I have in my mind is that when we come together as a full board to focus on this, it wouldn't be as simple as a 5-minute committee report up to the full board jammed into the rest of our agenda. So if we were to set a date, as Brian suggests, maybe we pick a date. It's midsummer, because that's giving the committees maybe 2-3 meetings apiece to work it out. And we then are gathering in a special meeting for the purpose of hearing both committees' findings and then figuring out next steps. And actually, then we give it the group conversation it deserves. So,
what are we actually charging the committees to do?
that's a good conversation.
Elect one. When you get there.
I've got fireworks going off in my head of all the things I hope they bring back, but if we don't talk about that, then they won't know what our expectations are.
I think it is incumbent upon the committees to define what it is that they want to bring to us regarding this particular motion, and I would encourage you, Brian, to attend the committees.
That is backwards.
So, yes.
You just sent it to
I would say that if we're referring something to committee, that we're telling the committees what we expect. We're not just, I mean, they could come back and just say ham and cheese sandwiches.
So
we're not giving them any direction, any scope on what it is that we're looking for, other than, from my understanding, what we just referred to them is a motion to consolidate Cutler students into the Mount Caesar campus. That's what we've done.
right, that's what we've sent to them.
Yes.
And before I called on you, I was beginning to say that I would encourage Brian and those most invested in this to attend the committees and more clearly define what it is we would like to see at the full board. Yeah, Brian.
I would like to give my charge now. So what I would like out of the Finance Committee, I would like to have a price on what it's going to cost us to close Cutler and add on enough rooms and space, including a multi-purpose room like we talked about last meeting, most likely a larger cafeteria. So, and we talked about, we met with Train or had a presentation from Train here 2 meetings ago, all right, on some potential cost savings. So, for me, I would like to hear back from the committee on what the potential cost, we're looking at to do that. Personally, I think that sending anything to the Education Committee at this point in time is way, a wagon well out in front of that race.
All right, any other discussion on whether we should send this to education, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the reason why I would like finance and education to be able to discuss this in the same room, because there's going to be requirements on the education of those children when you have them in a given square footage of a X number of square feet and teachers per, you're going to have all those requirements, and that's going to directly impact what the financial costs are going to be. So if not, they at least need to meet separately and coordinate in some fashion in order to probably come up with the proper numbers that we're going to look for.
Scott?
I was about to rattle off some thoughts I have for the referral to education as to what I would hope the Education Committee would come back with. I think I'll take those offline and send Betty an email of what I'm thinking. I would encourage everybody to engage the 2 committee leaders with your thoughts on this conversation. And inside of the end of this week so that they can prep their meetings.
All right. Winston?
I have a concern here. What you're asking, Bruce, is a great idea, but who's going to do those numbers? We're going to ask our business manager to come up with all them numbers, because they're already worked. Pretty tough to get their work done. And the committee members themselves have not going to have the access to all the numbers they need to come up with an answer. And the A-team needs to get involved here to say, do you think this is a good idea now or not? And get some numbers, because I haven't heard a single thing said. This is going to save us $100 million, or it's going to save us 5 cents.
Ryan?
I think you bring up a good point, Wynn, and exactly why I don't think it's a good idea to go to committee, right? If the committee doesn't think that they can do it, then let's not send it to the finance committee, right? Let's sit here and have that discussion as a group. If there is something that we need, whether we need to address it from an outside professional entity, then we do that. You know, part of our discussion last meeting was, first, we need to, also understand what we're potentially are able to do down south. Whether that's build on the Troy or, anything else. We have to address that concern first. I said last meeting that drastically could potentially change what we want to do going forward or we're able to do going forward. If we can't do anything on Troy property, then that's a different discussion about how we consolidate schools.
Okay. Nick and then Betty.
I think at the very least that we need to refer this to education so that they can, if we're going to go to the committee route and not do it all at the board, it has to go to education, because finance can't do anything until education has defined what we need to do.
Betty.
Yeah, I will volunteer to get in touch with Karen, and we could work out a joint meeting between the two committees, but off the school board time, because, as you said, we've got a big agenda here tonight.
All right.
And then a time frame. Anybody have
a time frame for the two committees to come back?
To come back, yeah.
July 1st?
Too late. June 1st.
So we're going to have a meeting
The whole
on
reason
June
we-
5th. June 5th?
June 5th.
I like the aggressive nature, but I don't know what regular business of the two committees were hijacking by saying that.
I would agree.
All right.
So you said June 5th? That's a board meeting night.
That would be the deadline
Okay.
to provide the findings back.
All right, let's go ahead and take a motion, or I'm sorry, a vote on the motion to send this over to education. Were there any last comments? All in favor of sending this to education?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
Abstentions?
Sure, I'll abstain.
So Nick is abstaining, and you have opposed for Rob and Brian. Okay. Moving along, do we have any other discussion or motions on this particular topic for this evening?
2.242.
Teacher Appreciation Luncheon. Teachers Appreciation Week is 5/7 to 5/11 this year. It has been tradition for the board to support them and to show them appreciation by giving them a lunch at some point during that week. So is there anyone who would like to make a motion to that effect?
I will.
Second.
Or second.
Yeah.
So I heard Betty with the motion and Eric with the second. All right, let's further define exactly what that motion was, Betty.
I would like to propose that we supply a lunch for all personnel in the district on whatever day Tom Walsh says works for him, because he usually does a really, really nice bag lunch.
Okay, so any day during the week of 5/7 through 5/11. Okay, and all staff, that was the important thing.
Very important.
Yeah,
Just
Neil.
for clarification, are you talking about an in-house lunch?
Tom's Walsh usually does up a really nice bag lunch.
In-house?
In-house,
Okay.
for everybody.
Just asking.
I just wanted to make sure that it included all staff.
All right, any other discussion?
Could we just ask administration to let the board know what buildings are receiving it on what days? It's kind of nice to go visit your building when the lunch is being provided, if you're able.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? None. Deliberate on splitting finance from facilities / capital improvement at the committee level. So this brings us back sort of to what we were just discussing. However, it ties in a way that we may have an opportunity to put capital improvement in with the facilities committee and separate out finance. I did want to say a piece about this. When the motion came to us, it was Eric who asked for this to be on the agenda. And Eric, did you want to say something first, and then I'll give a little bit of history?
No, I think that if we really want to look at doing something from a building perspective and really explore the district and do what we should be doing, I think that we need to get the facilities to working by itself again. I think there's just too much other stuff going on with the finance side of things. I think facilities, there's plenty to do with just facilities, and if we do that, I'd like to be on that committee.
Okay. I'll say that when I joined the board 9 years ago, finance was always separate from facilities. I was the most recent chair of the facilities committee when it was facilities alone. But in the June meeting of 2014 at Camp Dakota, the board did something that many of the board members didn't agree with. We changed the composition of the negotiations committee, and everybody who was affected by that resigned from every committee that they were on. So we had 4 board members that decided not to participate in board committees. The rest of us had to scrape together what we could, and that resulted in combining technology with education and also combining finance with facilities. It was something that we had to do. It wasn't anything that we wanted to do at the time. We found that the committees at that time functioned better and were more productive separate from one another. That is the history of how we got to where we are now. And I know that the Finance and Facilities Committee itself has expressed an interest in staying as just one committee. I feel like it is, though, important for all of us to understand where that one committee came from, and the fact that it was because the board was under so much pressure at the time to do more with fewer people. All right. Is there any other discussion on Eric's motion?
Question.
Yes.
So we just made a motion to send the discussion about consolidation to the finance and facilities. So if we split those committees, where does that motion and which committee does that end up?
Both ways.
So, okay.
So it would go to finance, facilities. If we split them up, it would go to finance, facilities, and education. If anybody thinks that I am incorrect about that, please let me know, but that's the way I
Oh, it sounded pretty accurate.
Okay.
I remember when I first got on the board, there were some pretty ticked off people.
Yeah. Yep. 4 of them who were very active members and chairs of the committees that they resigned from. So it was a painful year, but we made do. Yes.
You did just say that the current committee would like to stay as a combined committee. Is that what you said?
Several months ago, we asked them the same question. They discussed it in committee, and they decided to request that the board leave them the way they are.
Given the recent, sorry.
That was prior to the newly seated board and those of us who came together in March. Scott?
Betty had her hand up first.
Oh, Betty.
I was at Finance and Facilities, the first meeting, and they still wanted to stay together, even if it meant they had to meet more often. They thought there was merit in having the 2 committees together.
There's always merit in 2 committees collaborating with one another.
Yep.
They don't have to be the same people meeting at the same time.
Right.
I'm sorry, who was next? Was it?
I was.
Scott.
We talked at the last meeting about going through a discussion of what's expected of the committees, not this committee, but all the committees. You know, what are they to accomplish? And, you know, some of the committees have charters and some of the committees haven't created them, but we still have yet to kind of define the time investment that goes into doing this. So if we don't all have the same expectation, then we're going to get mixed results. So in the context of this motion, if we were to split the 2 committees, I think it's kind of self-evident what finance is versus facilities, but then what are we expecting these 2 committees to accomplish over the course of the year, not just with the motion that's just come down tonight. You know, what does the facilities committee as a standalone do for the next 11 months?
How many of us have been on the board since 2014? So Eric, Betty, right? Scott, how long have you been here?
My 4th year.
Yeah. Winston and me. I think we all recall when the two committees were separate and what the different responsibilities were of the two committees. So if there was guidance to be had, there are board members who recall the way that it was sort of delineated in the past. Would that be sufficient, you think?
I don't think so, because these are heated times and we're trying to navigate some much more difficult issues that we weren't navigating 3 or 4 years ago.
Eric?
I go back to, these are nothing compared to some of the times that we had back in the early 2000s when we were trying to get this school, when we were on probation, we were trying to get this school up to standards. And I look at what the facilities committee did back then. It was able to put that 5-year no plan into place for those that have been around long enough, but was able to do that and get it passed every year. And I think that's something that the facilities committee can do again in this. I think it's something that, you know, it requires a lot of meetings and it requires a lot of work, but I think it's something that can get done with that. So I think it's the only way it's going to get done, to be honest with you.
All right, any other discussion?
Yeah, I think we've spent more talking about structures of committees than we have about substance tonight.
Once it gets to the committees, they will discuss the substance, that's for sure. All right, any other discussion? Let's take a roll call vote on this, Jeremy.
What's the motion now?
The motion is to separate the finance committee from a capital improvement / facilities committee.
So we don't.
That would be the new committee?
Eric made the motion.
No second.
I'm sorry.
Second.
All right, Kristen.
Pass.
Win.
No.
Neil.
Abstain.
Nick.
Nope.
Brian.
No.
Rob.
Yes.
Sherry.
Yes.
Eric.
Yes.
Betty.
No.
Scott.
Yes.
Lisa.
Yes.
5.35.
Kristen.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kristen. I apologize.
No.
5.359 yes, 4.686 no, 1.075 abstain.
All right.
That would leave us with pointing to the committee.
Right. So as it stands, we would have the same committee members on each of the two committees. Is there anyone on the Finance Facilities Committee that wishes to stick with one half or the other?
I can't do another committee, so I need to stick with one half.
Yeah, so which half do you prefer?
I'll go to facilities. That's obviously something I'm passionate about.
And I heard Eric say you wanted to be on facilities.
Yes.
I'm assuming that Karen wants to be on finance. Maybe I shouldn't assume. I will call her and find out. Yes, Betty?
I prefer not to be on both because I'm already on a whole bunch and I'd like facilities.
Facilities, Karen.
So the ones that are on there now, we're going to just transfer over?
So
Stay the same?
it would automatically be the same people serving on both committees.
Okay,
But at this time, we're talking about whether anyone would like to withdraw from one half or the other. All right. Who else is on finance and facilities right now?
Neil, Winston, Karen, Rob, Betty.
Winston, do you want to be on both?
Yes.
Okay. Neil,
Both what?
do you want to be on finance and facilities capital improvement?
Yeah.
Okay.
Question.
Yes.
So does that mean that the definition of finance committee, at least from this point forward, is the general housekeeping and annual process type of stuff related to finances, and all the capital discussions will go with the facilities committee?
Yes, until it's referred by facilities to finance for some sort of study or review.
Okay.
Yeah. That leaves us needing probably 2 more people for finance. Is there anyone who would like to volunteer for the finance committee?
How about the people that aren't here?
That's right.
We know Karen's probably answer, but I don't know.
So,
What does that leave? 3 on finance?
yeah, so Karen,
Now you're gonna-
Winston, and Neil.
So now you're gonna have issues making quorum, and you're gonna end up making a motion next week to fold them together because you can't have a finance meeting.
No, I'll do finance just to keep the ship moving.
All right, so policy says that the board chair can approve committees with the support of the board. So I propose that for finance, we have Karen, Winston, Neil, and Scott. Could I have a vote of support for that? Would anyone like to approve the committee as Karen, Winston, Neil, and Scott?
I would make that motion to approve the committee as just stated.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
All right. For facilities, I propose Rob, Eric, Karen, Winston, and Neil. Same thing. Can I have a motion for, so Betty made the motion to support.
Second.
Second
No,
from
no,
Sharon.
I know,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm on the, I wanted to be on the committee.
On facilities.
Yeah.
I wrote down Karen's name instead of yours. I'm sorry. Okay. Gotcha.
Make the motion for that slate.
All right. Is
Second.
there a second from Scott? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
All right. Very good.
Will we get an updated list of committee assignments then?
Yes, you will. Yeah, and I need to call Karen to make sure that I didn't make any assumptions about her that were unwelcome. I'll also call Becky to see if she wants to be on either or.
And 1.8.
All right, board chair report. So, I suppose it would be appropriate for me to let you guys know that my passenger is no longer with me. So Addie is with us now, and I'm sorry if you haven't seen a photo. If anybody wants to see a picture, I have a bunch after. I was just going through my board report. I'm sorry, when I opened my package. Do you see what Lillian did? Isn't that cute? Yeah, she put that in the package for me. So Adelie's here. I also want to ask the board, since we have some new folks here, and I wish Becky was with us, I'll give her a call and talk to her about this too. But I want to remind the board that if we have requests for information, or if we have any sort of comment or complaint or anything that we might feel needs to be directed toward administrators, you should come to the board chair or Lisa Witt, the superintendent, first as a board member. That would be the appropriate way to handle these things rather than going directly to administrators. And I've made this mistake before myself. You know, as a board member, sometimes if you're a parent also, you don't realize that the influence that you have as a board member. So just a couple of days ago, I noticed on our Troy School Facebook page that the link to the Troy School webpage wasn't correct. So I shot off a quick note, hey, can we just update the link to the Troy School webpage? You know, I felt like that was a small thing, but I'm a board member, and in a way that's sort of assigning work to an administrator. That's not really appropriate. Maybe I shouldn't have done that, but I did it not even thinking. And it's easy to do those things as a board member, but we need to make sure that we are not going directly to administrators and that we're only going to Lisa or bringing concerns or questions to me as well. And is there anything you want to add to that, Lisa?
No, it also helps ensure that, you know, I'm aware of kind of what's happening, you know, procedurally that's part of our policy, but just from a practical standpoint, it helps keep me in the loop as well, so I appreciate it.
Nick?
And just one thing to add to that. I typically go to Lisa Witt, but usually I end up having to go through Lillian. So, I mean, it is appropriate as well if that's who you have as your public-facing person, to be able to go to that person.
That's right. Lillian can make sure that things get on Lisa's radar screen as well.
Yes.
We're throwing you under the bus a little bit. Yeah. And thank you for this. That was really cute. Thank you. All right. I need to let the board know that there's going to be a change to the Camp Dakota meeting. And that would have been the first meeting in June at Camp Dakota. We are either going to have to switch the Camp Dakota to our location for the second meeting in June, or find someplace else in Richmond to meet, because it's not available in the first meeting in June. So there's a small shift to the schedule that's forthcoming. And can everyone let me know just by nodding your head or sort of raising a finger, have you finished your evaluations? Remember the link that I sent? Yeah. All right, so that's almost everyone. I'm guessing that you can have a couple more days.
Evaluations of
superintendent.
Yeah.
I'll be able to do that tomorrow. I'll be stuck in Boston.
I haven't pulled the data yet.
I figured you probably wouldn't until after tonight, so.
It'll probably be the end of next week, probably Friday.
Okay, so if you haven't done it, you've got a little bit of time.
Should have said this Friday.
Don't back off the deadlines.
And we had a little bit of a chat at our last meeting about wanting to get a lot more done at the board. So we've packed this agenda really, really full. And our intent is to be more productive in our meetings. But I do need to remind the board that as we get later into the evening, we become less productive because we're a little bit rusty or maybe a little snippy sometimes. We've had that experience at the board in the past. So we will continue to try to put the really heavy items toward the beginning of the agenda so we can do it while we're fresh. And sometimes you'll see that causes us to have to circle back to those items later in the agenda. So for instance, this evening, we do have something under other matters for discussion that is expectations and investment in committees. We could have jumped into that and spoken about it when we were just covering what was going on with finance and facilities. However, we do need to make sure that the stuff that requires our action and our most crisp thought is happening early in the agenda. So you'll see it's it'll be more disjointed, but hopefully it's for the purpose of making things more productive in the long run. Okay?
On one page?
What's that?
Still on one page?
We're trying. I mean, the font's getting smaller and smaller.
Font's getting smaller.
All these things are getting...
We are trying. All right. And I'll hand it over to you, Lisa, then.
Okay. I'm going to take some of these, probably not in the same order that they're on your agenda, just for ease. I know Jeremy covered this in my absence, and again, I apologize for being at the last meeting. But just a reminder about the end of year dates. The last day for students will be June 8th. Last day for certified staff is June 14th, and graduation is June 2nd. At this point, it was snowing again today, I'd like to point out. Didn't accumulate. I heard somebody joke that this is the 105th day of January. It feels like it, so hopefully we're done. Earlier tonight, you heard from Jerry Kuhn and the Destination Imagination group. We do need to approve their trip, or the board needs to approve their actual trip because it is out of state and it is overnight. So we'll be looking for a motion. They have the requisite number of chaperones.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Just going to ask for discussion.
I handed out, it came around, preliminary kindergarten enrollment numbers and projections. Just to, I think it's self-explanatory, but just to walk through it real quick. Everything in yellow is a projection. For pre-K, those are projections based on known kiddos that we have who have IEPs from the age of at the age of 3 and 4. There may be more kiddos entering throughout the year, but those are safe estimates based on what we know and history. Kindergarten is based on actual registrations at this point. I expect those to go up. They always do. We had registration in March, and we always get folks, we accept kindergarten registrations all the time. So typically we'll see a surge hopefully not as late in the summer as we did a couple years ago. Trying to do a better job of getting the word out to get folks to come in earlier so that we can have better predictions. I would especially expect the Mount Caesar number to go up because they have the most students anyway as far as primary school, and we typically see a lot more late registrations there than anywhere else. And then in ninth grade, historically we've had an uptick in ninth grade over eighth grade levels because we have kids coming back from St. Joe's and other private schools at the eighth grade level, so that I adjusted that number to reflect some of history. So still projections. All of the other numbers are current school year from our BOY. Although we did quickly check them against current enrollments, and they're pretty close to where we currently are too. So, Nick?
Lisa, does your projection include your estimation on what's in addition to the current registrations?
Only with the ninth grade.
So with the elementary schools, it excludes what you expect to see the bump. Okay.
Correct. I want to give it a little more time to take in more registrations and see, because we've only had registration open since the end of March, so it's only been a few weeks.
Question. All the kindergartens at this point are full-day kindergarten?
Yes.
So in the context of all of our school merge consolidation conversations and as facilities is looking at, room space and all those kinds of things, this stuck out to me earlier in the week that when we were not so stressed about the finances related to maintaining all of our campuses, 3-5 years past, we were half-day kindergartens and we didn't have those preschools in place. Those are initiatives that we've taken on. Now, can you refresh me a little bit about kindergarten funding status?
Sure. Kindergarten up through this year is funded. We get half-day funding. So each student, we get 0.5 of adequacy. For next year and subsequent years, that number moves up to an additional $1,100. So it's not quite full adequacy, depending on Keno revenues. If Keno revenues, I don't know what the threshold is to tick up the reimbursement rate. So it could be as much as full adequacy in the future. We're guaranteed at least $1,100 more than that 0.5 amount. So with these numbers, you're looking at a little over around $110,000, give or take, additional next year. We did not project that into revenues at the time when we hadn't had anything official from the state saying put this in your revenues. It came in very late. So as we rework our revenue projections for the fall, we'll work that in once we have better numbers as well. The preschool, we've had preschool. We run preschool for largely through special education. The program in Troy was expanded a couple of years ago, but we've had the other locations for quite a while, and so those serve a lot of our students with IEPs at the ages of 3 and 4. And we also have the Back to Basics program through ACES, which is not included in these numbers because it's a separate program.
Mm-hmm. So, thank you. I am a passionate believer in our preschool efforts as well as the kindergarten efforts. So, by no means when I say this do I mean that we should stop doing what we're doing. But when I look at those initiatives that we've taken on from our own strength financially, staffing capacity, room capacity in buildings, those are the grades that I suspect may have the most opportunity to move to another location, given that they don't necessarily have to be as intertwined with the older grades from an educational perspective. That's an assumption I have. And financially, I don't know if there's breathing room we can create if we were to back off from those initiatives. But I do think that that should be part of the conversation the committees are having, that they should explore that. And are we committed to this approach of PK3 and PK4 and full day kindergarten no matter what we decide regarding all our other buildings? I think it should be on the table.
Nick.
I guess I don't. I heard the words, but I don't understand. What are you suggesting?
Could we choose to move pre-kindergarten to a different building temporarily, even a rental space, in order to create or facilitate some kind of a 5-year plan?
For all the towns?
I don't know. Should we back off from pre-kindergarten, preschool for a season in order to facilitate our building or our financial goals? I don't know, but I think it should be part of the conversation.
for students on IEPs, we do have to provide some sort of preschool for the 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds.
And you have to have typical students that they go to school with. You can't just have a full class of kids with special needs.
So those are things I don't understand, that we're not just taking on pre-kindergarten from our own strength. We actually have an obligation. Didn't understand that till this moment, so that's, thank you.
However, you're partly correct. We did have it only at Mount Caesar, and we've expanded it to other locations. Right. Of our own accord. All right, Betty.
I have a question. At Mount Caesar in the pre-K 3 and 4, are there 3 teachers in 2 classrooms still?
I believe it's 2 teachers in 2 classrooms.
Say that again, Betty. I'm sorry, I missed it.
In the pre-K 3 and pre-K 4, I remember a few years ago, the 2 classes are still in 2 classrooms, but there was a 3rd teacher that worked between the 2 rooms. Is that so? Are there 3 teachers in 2 rooms?
There are 2 teachers, and there's a pre-K case manager that works between the 2 classrooms as well.
Okay, and the case manager is delivering services?
I'm not certain to what extent, but I know that she has been working in the classrooms.
I'm just looking at 23 4-year-olds and thinking.
They're half day, so it's split in half. So it's 12, probably 11.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yep.
At a time.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you.
Oh, it's still me. In your packet was an updated organizational chart. Jeremy shared the feedback from the previous meeting, so it's still in draft form. And I haven't had a chance to work the same structure with the individual schools. Just haven't had the time to work on that. And I haven't quite gathered all of the staffing, total numbers of staff yet. I'm still working on gathering those. But I wanted to just present you with an updated kind of what it looks like based on some of your feedback, with the number of folks in each category.
I got it.
You got it? Rob?
I brought this up last week. I don't know if I did it just privately, but is there an assessment, or is there a, for example, if you're out, who's in charge?
It's typically a team approach. We do most things with the team approach anyway. So if there's a question about, if I'm out, and I know that both, that Jeremy, Kathy, and Janelle are here, I expect that one of them will field whatever is most appropriate for them to field. So if there's a student issue, that typically will land with Jeremy. If there's anything related to finances or, things that fall into Janelle's lane, she would handle those, and anything related to student services and special education typically would go to Catherine. And I'm always reachable, so in the event that unless there's something, my phone's not working somewhere, but these guys can always reach me if they're not sure how to respond as well. So I will continue to work on that, filling in those numbers and working on that, what it looks like at each of the schools as well. I hope to have that for you. If not the first meeting in May, then the second. Also in your packet, there was a piece of paper that was blue and white and had very small writing, as Wynn pointed out. And it was just a page from the PSI update or the infrastructure and safety grant update. I think I had mentioned that we had applied for the safety and infrastructure grants at Cutler, Mount Caesar, the middle high school, and Gilsum. And we received the grant from Cutler. We heard about that in January. The others were not funded. The state, there was about $19 million allocated for this project, and they have granted all of those grants. There's the potential for sort of like when the bucket gets refilled. There are a lot of towns or districts that I learned that had proposed some substantial projects that were tied to warrant articles that failed. So some of those grants will be rejected by local municipalities, and so those funds may become available. I'm not sure where we are in the queue. This is sorted by SAU, so I'm not sure how they are prioritizing. So there's still the potential. There's also the potential for legislative action to allocate more money to this endeavor. So, but the applications are in, they're in the queue. So hopefully in the future, more funds will become available and we'll be able to access those. Also that came around was a quick summary or update of the budget for 2018-19. And the top page just to explain what you're looking at there. Actually, let's go to the second 2 pages because it's a lot easier to work from that. The second 2 pages were from the PowerPoint from the joint session back in November. When we shared with both the board and the budget committee the administration's thoughts regarding the 18-19 budget. And you can see on that first page, should be your first page where it says preliminary budget items, the .5 social studies teacher, there's a line drawn through that. We have looked and we are restructuring our social studies curriculum at the high school so that I believe with a focus on civics towards the end of students' careers as opposed to the beginning as they are getting ready to enter into the quote unquote real world and some other curricular initiatives. And so we had anticipated that might be a need for this year. Based on enrollments, we've decided that it's not for this year, but will likely in the future as kids age into the program. That will be something that we will probably need to increase in the future. But for right now, we don't have enough of those kids aging in through the curriculum that we need to include that for this year.
Where are we? Are we still following the four-year plan for each major area of education? So we had a 4-year plan where we revised and what is it?
The rolling curriculum review.
Right.
I'll ask Jeremy to but yes, in general terms, but Jeremy can provide a little detail.
In general terms, right. We're shoring that up and it's social studies year coming up.
Okay. That's what I was wondering.
Yep.
Are we in math here right now?
We're we're finishing up with math. We're in social studies and coming up next year.
Science.
Guidance is coming up. Science is looking
Health.
right now. We're, on paper, it looks like you can do it all exactly, and science is taking longer because the NGSS came in. So we're responding to that. But we have all of the curriculum is rolling, and social studies is the one that really needs updated materials, and we're planning for that. Okay. I'm going to talk to them tomorrow actually about it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So then the others were just the other things that we had put on the table, one of them being hiring a library media specialist to work across all of the elementary schools. As you recall, we have paraprofessionals who serve in the capacity of the library media assistant. And in addition to doing library media, they've also this year been working with STEM and Makerspace. And so the intent, again, just as a review behind this position, was to hire somebody who also has that background, and that's actually a requirement for New Hampshire certification now for library media specialists. So this will help us to really advance the STEM and STEAM concepts in the elementary schools as well. And then the second page was just the preliminary budget reductions, and I've handwritten in some edits to that. We had talked about, for example, halfway down through attrition, for the most part, a reduction of 3.5 positions. It ended up being 3. But the actual amount, because of those folks where they were in their contracts, the amount came in a little bit higher than we had anticipated for those reductions because we had somebody retire that we didn't anticipate. So. And then under the IDEA restructure, we had talked in the fall about looking at how we use our Individuals with Disabilities Education Grant, IDEA. And so what we did was we were partially funding some positions out of the grant and partially funding them out of general fund. So what we've done is we've moved all of the positions back out of the grant into the general fund and then looked at those positions and to see what those responsibilities were, if they really still meet our needs. And we've made some adjustments to those positions, and those are reflected on the first page of the packet, down at the bottom. So under the section that has my lines around it on the left-hand side, the top part are those partial, those are the current positions in the general fund that we're reconfiguring to the 3 positions at the bottom that will go to the IDEA grant. Does that make sense?
No.
So we have, it's actually a 0.8 position. The first 2 is actually 1 position split between 2 schools. And the responsibilities of that position are being merged into the position of early learning liaison under the grant. So the position's still there. It's being redefined slightly to better meet our needs. and we're putting it into the grant. So there's no longer this split between general fund and grant. It becomes a bit of an accounting nightmare. Would you agree? And so all of those under that reductions piece, that's what those are. They're just being reconfigured into those slightly different positions. And then under FTE additions, those two, the 21,027 and the 78,458, those are those partial positions in the grant that are coming back to the general fund.
Okay.
So that represents, I think, 7 positions maybe. It's a percentage of each of those positions. It's in the grant, bringing all of that back. It's still a net savings, no matter how you look at it. But I just wanted to walk you through that because we hadn't really gotten into the weeds on that before.
Nick.
So on the first page,
Yep.
FTE, I'm assuming full-time employee?
Yep.
FTE reductions, we have a whole bunch of employees here that are 0.4, 0.2.
Yep, those were, so the top 2 0.4s, for example, and the 0.2, it's actually all one person. But they're split between 3 places right now.
Okay.
All right. And so, the responsibilities of those 3 positions are actually being split out slightly. So
Okay,
I don't
so-
want to get into too much detail because there are actually still people in these positions, and there's an awareness that this is happening, but I want to give you sort of the broad strokes.
Well, I mean, I want to understand, if you're presenting the data, I want to understand the data.
No, absolutely, and I'm trying to explain it in a way that's not going to say it's this person. Do you know what I mean?
So you have a 0.4, 0.4, 0.2, that's one individual?
Yep.
0.4 and 0.4?
Yep.
And then the one in the middle is separate?
Yes.
Okay. And that's where you get the 2.8?
Yep.
And we define, was it 0.8 or more as full-time?
Yes, under MDEA, yes, because 0.8 would be eligible for benefits. And there's actually that 0.8, there's another 0.2 that's not being reduced out of the, so it's actually a whole person, but it's not represented here because that responsibility isn't being shifted into the grant.
So to clarify, the early learning liaison and the other 2, these are newly created positions, but you don't need board approval because they're grant funded, correct?
We do need you to approve the positions so that we can hire for them. Same with the library media specialist, because the elementary library media specialist is a new position. So they do need to be approved by the board so that we can hire for them. Even though those 3 are grant funded, they're still positions of the district, and the funds, we're basically the fiscal agent for the funds, so.
Are you seeking that approval this evening, or will you bring job descriptions? Or?
I would be seeking approval for this evening.
Okay. Betty?
Just a couple questions. What is an early learning liaison?
That person will be responsible for pre-kindergarten case management across the district.
And then?
And transitions.
Okay. And then the second one there, out-of-district/court liaison. So that person would be doing all the out-of-district placements now? Who's been doing them?
We have a 0.6. Is it 0.6 or 0.8 right now? I think it's 0.6.
It's 1 person 0.6, 1 person 0.2.
1 person 0.6, 1 person 0.2. Thank you.
Yep.
So it's split right now. So that would be 1 person.
Right.
And right now, Kathy Woods is doing all of the court liaison work, and she spends an insane amount of time in court and not in district.
Yep. Because it sounds like a big job.
Yeah. And then the assistive technology specialist is for working with students who have assistive technology needs. We have quite a few students who have quite extensive needs. So
And we're currently contracting a lot of that out, right?
we are.
Yikes. Nick?
Just to further my understanding here, so we have on the first page again, we have full-time employee reductions, so that's 4.
At the top, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes.
Okay. Full-time employee additions, we have the 1.
Correct. That's the library media specialist position.
Full-time employee reductions, the next section is 2.8, but 3 people.
Right. And those 2.8 positions are moving to the grant as 3 reconfigured positions.
Okay. And the full-time employee additions, the last one that have no numbers next to them, what is this?
That is the percentage of positions that are currently sitting in the IDA grant. So I think we have 6 or 7 folks, actually I think it's 8, who a percentage of their salary comes out of the grant. So that's all of those percentages pulled back in to the general fund. So that represents, I think, 25% of 8 people, those 2 numbers combined.
25% of 8 people.
I think it's 8 people. I'm trying to picture the chart in my head.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, yeah.
So at this time, you're not asking us to approve, hirings of specific names into any of these positions or any retirements or resignations. You're just asking us to approve the adjustment of the FTE allocation to suit the grant.
And to approve the position so that we can advertise and then bring a candidate to you to hire. Yeah.
Question about the early learning liaison. So am I to understand that we will have one case manager for all of preschool now? So that's one case manager dealing with the early intervention programs at MDS and RISE?
Yes.
Good. So they only have to know one person for transitioning the IFSP to an IEP?
Right.
Cool.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question when she's done. Before she, if she wants to keep talking about this, that's fine. I want to revisit this.
Oh, okay. We'll take a couple of motions on this first, and then we can get back to that.
Lisa, so when it's all said and done, the total cost of the district not afforded any support from the grant. Are we adding?
It's a reduction overall.
Go ahead.
So for the top portion on that front page, the FTE reductions offset by the FTE additions is a net savings to the district of $223,000, almost $224,000. And then with the shift in the grant positions, it's an additional net savings of $60,000. So overall, about $284,000 to the district from this year's budget moving into next year.
Nick?
And just from 30,000 feet, this is part of how you're going to make ends meet with our reduced budget this year?
This was part of the plan that we rolled out in November as part of our proposed budget. So this is exactly what we proposed with real numbers attached to it this time. At that time, we had to use our round figures to estimate, and so the actual savings is a little bit higher than we anticipated. So it's a good thing.
Kristen?
So if we motion to approve these 3 positions, is that taking any jobs away from current? Okay.
Folks, we'll post the positions. These will all be positions that fall within the MDEA collective bargaining agreement. I have already discussed these with the association, so they're aware that that these will be positions that fit into that definition. So we'll post them. We'll see if folks apply internally. If not, then we do have a transfer process that is allowed for in the contract that we would invoke. We would anticipate either having folks. I'm confident that for at least 1 or 2 of these folks will be interested in applying from within the district.
Right. Any other questions? Rob?
So I was going to save this, but if we're going to vote, then I want to bring it up. Going back to the organizational chart and the reductions, and also at the positions that you're asking us to vote on tonight. And one of the glaring absences I see is a director of human resources. Mm-hmm. And that is of great concern to me. And I appreciate the fact that every time, you're taking on an awful lot along with the rest of the staff. However, we don't have an independent group there or person there. And I think back at some of the complexity of the situations that have at least come to our attention. And I think that is something I would make a motion to. I don't know if make a motion. I'd like to at least hear more on your thoughts about not having a human resource director and at the same time, adding. I forget the name of it. What was it? A media specialist?
Library media specialist.
Library media specialist. Now, I'm not against library media specialists. But I do see that as a glaring weakness in our structure. And I'm concerned that we should fill that or at least address it sooner than later.
I don't disagree with you. It wasn't part of the budget that we proposed in the fall. I think, it's something that I've spoken with the current leadership team about. think it's something we were looking to probably bring up in this budget cycle. But again, I was working strictly off of what we proposed in the fall and trying to move those pieces forward at this time so that we can, get those positions advertised and fill them. But I would certainly welcome a more robust conversation about the need for an HR director.
Do we have the ability to change add anything to the budget that we discussed in November?
So we would have to take the money from someplace else if we wanted to hire an HR director.
You don't want to read that RSA, Robert?
So we're bound to what we discussed in November.
Once the number is approved, we can make changes to where those funds are allocated.
Okay.
I would definitely, Lisa and the administrative team have put forward a lot of effort. And like she said, we first heard about it right after Halloween. And I'm concerned about changing stuff and adding stuff that's going to force them to do things that they may not want to do. I think if it's a concern that we have for next year's budget, it sounds like it's a concern of them as well. That's something we should work towards at that time. But they've already made a lot of effort in getting to where they are for this budget. They've even reduced it, which is commendable.
I think I agree with you, but I also think I've watched as Lisa and her team have sort of picked their battles with how much they can get into each budget year to year. This is something I recall her mentioning at a meeting in her first year. So I think this is an area we could discuss, and if there are unencumbered funds at the very tail end and we see that there's enough to support even a part-time HR resource role, to work our way into it. I think if you want to bring us something in a future meeting, but your thoughts on a position, I think we'd welcome it.
Thank you.
And the other thing, we got off really easy with insurance this year as far as the premium increases. So everybody did in the district. So we're going to make sure that if we have some funds left over at the end of the year, that we're not, keep that in perspective. Those sorts of things where, whether it's, we didn't have as terrible of weather, or, the savings that we've had for heating, that sort of thing.
You have one more hand, please.
Two. Did I hear you correctly that you think one of the existing reading specialists will become the library reader?
No.
No?
Mm-mm. That's not what I said.
So
I said that.
How does this enhance our reading? If we already got, I don't know how many people floating around the building in Mount Caesar as reading teachers, how is this going to enhance it at the library reading teacher?
This person is a library media specialist will work with classroom teachers on literacy, on reading, on.
So we're going to add another reading teacher at Mount Caesar?
This is not a reading teacher. This is a library media specialist.
Not a teacher?
They fall under the MDA agreement. They have
That's what you said.
They
So it's a
have.
reading teacher.
They have a teacher credential, but they are not a reading teacher. They are a library media
So we're adding a
specialist.
reading teacher to Mount Caesar?
No, we are not.
Where is it going to be added?
This library media specialist is for all elementary schools.
It's going to move around?
Yes. Yep.
Patty.
Going back to the human resources position, currently the people that are doing those functions, do they have college degrees in human resources?
We have a personnel coordinator. We do not have a human resource coordinator. We don't have a human resource director. So we have folks. We have a personnel coordinator who has pursued training, within that. But it's not. We don't have anyone that has that director type of background or experience.
Okay.
Nick.
The assistive technology specialist, that individual, it's similar to. We used to have a position, is that similar to what Jeremy was doing prior to?
This one's focused more specifically on students with disabilities.
Okay, all right.
All right. Brian.
I would like to make a motion to accept the 4 positions as requested from administration.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion on accepting the 4 positions? That would be early learning liaison, out-of-district court liaison, assistive technology specialist, and library media specialist. All right, hearing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? abstentions. Very good.
Just one more piece. I think everybody knows I spent most of my career working in high schools, and I've been a building administrator in 3 different high schools. And at this time of year, it's standard practice for administrators, for teachers, for guidance counselors, to get together to ensure that all seniors avoid contracting what we jokingly call senioritis. It's very real, trust me, having seen it for decades. Part of this practice includes recognizing those students who may be the most vulnerable and providing appropriate supports to ensure that they meet their academic obligations. This year's no different from any other in that we have concerns about some students as they're helping them maintain their focus through the end of the year. These students and their parents have been notified of our concerns, and they've individualized appropriate supports in place to ensure that they successfully complete the year and graduate from Monadnock Regional Middle High School. Just wanted to let you know that we monitor this carefully, and I'm confident that our kids are going to make it. And that is my report this evening.
All right. We'll hand it over to you, Jeremy.
All right, so I apologize. You got a packet when you came in today. I'll pull the microphone closer so I don't mess up. You got a packet when you came in today, and I'm sorry that it wasn't in your regular packet, but this is the 2017 Youth Risk Behavior Survey Report. And this is a survey that's put out by the CDC for high schools all over the country. It's of note to say that when New Hampshire created their new opt-in law for surveys, this was excluded from that, and this is still an opt-out. We don't need specific permission from parents to do this survey like other non-academic surveys. This was put in there. This is a partial report. It's 92 pages long, and I didn't think anyone wanted me to go through 92 pages. And I'm not going to go through all these. What I wanted to do is to kind of honor that idea where I've been asked a lot, tell us highlights and tell us where we're concerned. So the highlights in this report, I included 2 sections. I included the drugs and alcohol section. And the highlights of this report is the drugs and alcohol numbers for us. Across the board, we've really dropped with the kids who are using drugs and alcohol. The risk factors for drugs and alcohol have significantly dropped, and we're below or right in line with the state and the region. So this is definitely a shining spot of this report for us. It goes to the work that the school has been really putting into drug and alcohol awareness, and ensuring that our students are physically safe with the drugs and alcohol. This is something that really stands out. Inversely, on the other side, I included information about suicide, sadness, helplessness, bullying, things that are really, important and have come up a lot. And honestly, I'll let you look through it, but what I'll say is that, we've either leveled from the last time we took this, or we've slightly gone up. And in most cases, we're right in line or above the state and the region for some of these areas. So it really is a big concern for us. What I want to say is that we gave this survey last year, and the drugs and alcohol was a pleasant surprise. The sadness and the suicide and those indicators wasn't really a surprise. So the middle school, high school has a wellness committee that's been working all year on these things before this report came out. And I just wanted to tell you about a couple initiatives that they're doing. They've been working with Monadnock Center for Violence Protection all year long to bring in programs for our students throughout 7 through 12 to really look at these issues. Through that, we had a training called the Youth Mental Health First Aid, and we maxed it out. We could only have 30 participants, and we had 30 participants that did this over 2 days. And what it is, it really looks at how do we prevent suicide or harm, how can we listen non-judgmentally, give reassurance and information, encourage self-help and other support strategies, encourage appropriate professional help. And it just gives us people in the building who are knowledgeable and watching for these things so that they can get the kids the support they need and bring them to the people who are the experts in these things. We've also really worked on our culture with the Dude Be Nice initiative, as well as I've explained to you before, we have Polly Bath, who is a behavioral culture consultant that we're using our Title II grant funds to support. She has 2 teams in the middle high school now. She has a middle school team and a high school team. And as part of those teams, they have they meet to discuss student needs, not just behavior, but student concerns. I met with the assistant principals today, and it was shared with me that as part of that initiative, the high school is really moving forward on what they're calling an MST, a Monadnock student team. And this is made up of people that are going to look at data, not just grades, but really look at concerns about kids who are absent and missing, concerns about behavior, concerns about sadness, and really have a team that's focused on taking these referrals and looking at kids and saying, what resources do we have? For example, they have their sitting members, and they explained, well, let's see if we have a kid who they want to talk about a kid, and they know that he might be an unaccompanied homeless youth or is in a homeless situation. They would invite me in to come talk about the resources that I can provide for that student as the homeless director. Or if there's outside organizations that can help a family or students, they're going to invite them into their meetings. This team's going to meet monthly, correct? Weekly. The other one meets monthly. Weekly to start doing this. So it's certainly not good. This data was really sad to read, honestly, when I read this one. But we do have, it sadly wasn't surprising, and we do have things in place that we're already moving on. We didn't wait for this report. We're moving on it all year long. Yeah.
Looking at, say, the last page, just as an example, when there's no markers in a particular year, like the inside, the 2015 for the second to last, and there's no data for our school, is it because the question wasn't asked or because the number was 0?
So what it is for 2015, there was a decision not to take it by the current, that administration didn't do it. If you see S's anywhere, that means that statistically the group is too small to report out on. So a good example of that would be, in a positive place, would be on the page about ecstasy and MDMA. For us, statistically, the number's too low to report without risking privacy of the students. That's a very positive result for us, and they mark that as an S. The other thing I just want to tell you, this is very informative. This report comes directly from the CDC. I didn't create this report, but this part here is really informative, and it talks about how they do it. You'll see that some of these numbers don't add up. So if you're looking at, why does it say the school is this many, but then male and female doesn't add up? It's because based on the grade level and male or female, if the numbers are too small, they don't necessarily report it out. They want to be very careful to protect student data because this is a pretty touchy subject. Like I said, it's about 92 pages. I'm happy to email it out if anyone wants to see the whole report. The New Hampshire website, the New Hampshire Health website, as part of the DOE, has an excellent resource that shows you what the survey looks like, breaks down the national statistics, talks about how the CDC started doing it, and it's very informative.
Just referencing the first front page, Jeremy, under our school level estimates, we had for 2017, 73% responded. What's your take on that concerning the remainder and whether or not that 73% is representative of the student body? Do you think that the remaining 27% perhaps may have fallen into many of these categories that are within here?
Yeah, I think that's a really solid question, and it's hard to speculate. When I look at it, if you look at 9th and 10th by grade, that's pretty much 100%. You're right there. And where we drop off is in 11th and 12th grade. And what I would say, and not scientifically and not knowing the exact facts of when the test was given and looking at attendance that day, 11th and 12th graders have privileges to not be in school at certain times. And I would wonder if the numbers dropped off there because of that. Or they've taken it before and they didn't want to take it again. I think it's a great question that I have to look farther at. We just got this report last week, and I thought it was important to share with you because if other schools start reporting it, I wanted you to know it existed. Mm-hmm. Lisa and her team are just digging into it and really looking at the data closely, and I think that's a great question to send along to them and say, are we worried that 27% might represent some bigger concerns that we don't know about?
Thank you.
Neil, sorry.
It's the second to the last page, and by the way, it'd be really cool if you numbered the pages before you made copies. But the second to the last page, if you look at 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, it keeps going down. I'm wondering, are the kids older than them? I guess you haven't looked at it yet. Picking on the younger kids and then finding they get old enough to defend themselves?
No, I think the reality is based on what I know and the situations I've been involved in is our 9th and 10th graders are less mature and less developed, and they're doing a lot more of the bullying and the cyberbullying. That's what this page is.
It's amongst themselves?
Amongst themselves, yeah.
Yeah.
They're doing amongst themselves, and by 11th and 12th grade, you know,
Okay.
they've been stung, and I think a lot of them have matured out of it and realized it's not the way to go. Is that fair? Yeah.
And like you say, there's a ton of math errors in it, but you say you didn't do the math.
I did not. You better believe I was going to tell you that, Neil. I knew you were looking. I was watching. The CDC made this one.
He was going to tell me before I looked.
Yeah. I've learned. I learned fast.
Neil, can you fix the errors and bring it to us next time?
It has to do with the statistics, and they do explain that they're not scientifically perfect statistics
Yeah, but
because
if
they're.
you look at certain pages, you can't do that excuse.
Yeah.
Because there's no S's. But
All right, Scott?
Is there any, regarding the sadness or the bullying, those topics that you're highlighting, is there any study of our middle school students, either by the CDC or by ourselves?
So that's a tough one because of the new law that came in. We've had a couple requests to some studies from student teachers who are doing their internship that want to do some action research and some seniors. But the New Hampshire state law doesn't allow us to do those types of surveys without opting in. And we're not getting a good response rate from parents to opt in. So it's a difficult thing to do and stay inside the New Hampshire law.
Sure.
So it's a long way to say no.
I thought the youth risk behavior survey used to start at grade 8. Is that no longer true?
I thought so too, and I went through all of the information, and it looks like they only did 9 through 12 for 2017.
Follow-up,
how
sorry.
many more, excuse me.
If we have educational curriculum on behavioral skills and such, how is this not an educational survey?
That's a really gray line that it's hard to be on the wrong side of, and I think Lisa has comments on that as well.
It's defined in the law. And this one is specific, this specific youth risk behavior survey through the CDC is exempted from opt-in. It's an opt-out. So some of that, the lessened response rate at upper grades may be opt-out as well. But for anything that's not specifically CDC sanctioned as youth risk behavior, it's opt-in, and it's very clear in the law what falls into that category. Because I've tried to make that argument to when I ran it by a few other folks, and they're like, yeah, no, you don't want to get on the wrong side of this one. But I definitely agree with you. I would argue it is educational, but not according to our legislature.
And I agree, and if you read the law, it's specifically to avoid forcing kids to answer these sorts of questions. I mean, so it's a really, except for this one. This one has been sanctioned by the state.
Well, it grew out of, I think it was Bedford, there was a real big concern about this survey, which spawned the first version of the legislation, which was completely opt-in, and then it was revised to make this one opt-out, so that because the data in this is so important.
Yeah.
How many junior high schools combined in the state?
Know
that?
No, but I'll find out.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that contributes to that number. Because I remember the time that somebody gave me a tour, I saw an 8th grader pick on a 7th grader, right in front of me. Didn't care.
That's a good question.
Does this include in our school, middle schools 7 and 8?
Just 9 through 12.
Schools, some of them are 6 to 8. Would that change any of the relationship or the numbers to ours?
Some of them too.
It could.
I didn't understand.
There's more students in some middle schools.
Depending if you have like a
than
6 to 12 school or 7 to 12 school, how does that impact the data? It's a good question.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. This was only given to 9th, 10th, and 11th, and 12th graders.
It's a shocking number, right?
So feel free. I can probably get that link out. to everybody, so you can see the state page, so you can kind of see it broken down. The next thing on my report, I just want to publicly thank the staff and faculty that traveled to Ferry Beach with the students last week. Lisa and I had a chance to go up with Barb Geis and Ryan
Schaefer.
Thank you, Schaefer. It's getting late. Ryan Schaefer, and visit on Thursday. It was a really successful week. Everyone was happy. It was a little bit cold, as I was told, but well,
but it wasn't.
But it was quite successful. A lot of you know that I've been going there for a long time and have a nice relationship with the staff up there. And I was pulled aside and told that the kids this week were probably some of the most polite that they've seen in a very, very long time, and they wanted to send that along. So it sounds like it was a very successful trip. The students will be working on a project to demonstrate their learning that we will get more details out to you about as it's time to show. I don't know the details right yet because I know you're working on them still. We're working. Yep. But I'll make sure that those get out to you so that you have a chance to see them if you'd like. And then the last thing was you had asked for the big overview topic to be athletics. So Tom's here. And Tom, if you want to come to the podium. So I'm going to just start the discussion. Tom's here to answer questions for you that you have. The first topic was the cost per sport. So in your packet, you should have an orange, it starts with orange for fall, sheet that breaks down the cost per sport. And the way this is broken out is fall, winter, spring. If you look at the spring, you'll see red numbers. It's because they're incomplete, because we're in the middle of the spring. And then the last page gives you kind of the running total, which is also incomplete for the school year because of spring. There were some questions about not getting this. We did check. It was in the board packet last year for May 7th. If anyone wants to go back and do some comparison, if you look at your May 7th board packet, that's where it was. So I didn't know if there were questions on this that we can specifically answer for you.
I didn't know we had bass fishing.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
My son wants
I want
to
to
do it.
coach.
The best fishing team in one time.
Yeah.
It's something at the state level.
Joe
Rapucci.
Joe Rapucci, who was our school board rep last year, is a bass fisher. He's on the bass fishing team.
And look out for next year's bass fishing team. We got 2 really good bass fishers, so should be pretty good.
We're going to be competing for the states.
And that doesn't cost us anything.
No.
So we'll keep them.
Yeah.
Is there girls bass fishing?
Yeah.
They can do the boys bass fishing.
What's the significance of the separate lines?
I'd have to take a look at it. Actually, Jeremy put this together, but these are the students who participate in sports, I believe.
Yeah, but I mean, how come there's so many lines at the same, under the same sport?
This?
Yeah.
All right. HSB is high school boys. MSB is middle school boys.
Okay.
HSG is high school girls. And then the HSBG is the co-ed teams.
Nick?
Okay. One of the things that's important to me is that we establish some sort of equity for students and participating in a lot of these programs. If we have some programs that are underfunded and looking for more funding, or we have some activities that students are participating in that don't have funding at all, that we establish a little bit of equity in that. Some of the case in point is we discuss funding of the hockey team, which we know has a high cost per student. When I look at it as a board member, my concern is that either approving or not approving certain funding for a sport like that, whether or not we're leaving other people without funding. So that's where I'm coming from as far as hearing some information about this. And I think it's going to tie in. I'm sure we get the hockey discussion later. So I'd like to hear your take on that.
I mean, I believe every sports team has what they need at this point. Every team's different, too, on how they work and the dynamic of them. So I think we're pretty equitable across the board. This is my second year into the job, so I think creating lines in the future will make things even better.
Kristen?
I just had question, just wanted to make sure for basketball under uniforms, I assume you just got new uniforms this year?
Yep, I did it for high school and middle school and matched them all the same. So it looked pretty good and it worked out pretty good for this year.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Under ice hockey, on the last page, Jeremy, the HS boys G, what's G mean?
It's boys and girls combined.
Oh, both on the same team?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, maybe have slash would have been nice.
Just to be clear too, our girls are allowed to play for Keene for hockey.
Oh, so they play on the hockey team in the Keene, because Keene has a girls team, right?
Yes, and they actually pay their own way too. They had to pay $650.
That's cheap for hockey.
It's cheap.
If you're a hockey person, you're used to that.
Can I speak?
Yeah.
I struggle a little bit. Do any of our other sports pay? Kids pay to play?
I'll bet bass fishing does. Somebody pays for it, right?
Right.
And it's mostly volunteers for the bass fishing. Our coaches have been great. They provide the boats, their own boats and their own gas, and the kids have their own fishing poles, and it's worked out, so it's been free.
Yeah, my fear in having kids pay to play is you have really changed the dynamic of interscholastic sports, in that I can easily foresee complaints. Maybe it's happened, maybe it hasn't happened. I paid $500 for my kid to play hockey, and he's not, or she's not playing. I mean, we have now.
And so we've worked hockey to the point where it's been fundraised. No one's had to really pay out of pocket. Some parents do. We ask them to fundraise $600 a piece. And some people do way more, and some people do nothing, and some people kind of hit the 600 and stop. So I get what you're saying. It does make it difficult on those parents who carry the burden for hockey. And then those that don't do anything, it's frustrating for those that do a bunch. And as far as playing time goes, it will get hairy at some point if people have to continue to pay and they're not getting the playing time that they want. Those complaints are going to come to me at some point, if I had to guess.
Scott.
Is hockey the only sport across all these pages that is not completely funded by the district?
Yes.
And do the hockey numbers represent the total cost or just the district expenditure?
That was the total cost for this year.
Actually, that's true for, excuse me just a second, when that's true for all of these, it's the total cost. So some of this gets reimbursed from boosters, correct, Tom?
Yeah,
like,
so the ice fees haven't come out of that $27,000-ish yet, which was around $16,000. So the boosters is going to be responsible to pay back $16,000 for their ice.
Anyone else? Nick.
One last question. As some of the costs associated with these sports go up, do we feel that there's any ceiling or limit on a student basis where we say the district is only going to invest so much into this sport per student, or do you feel that it's important enough that it be open-ended?
I'm a little confused by the question, I guess.
You know all this
That's
stuff.
hypothetical. Let's say it goes up to $5,000 a student to play any given sport. At what point do you, as an athletic director, when you're looking at distributing your funds, say, you know, maybe we need to look at how much money we're investing into this single sport?
I'll field that one if you want. You know, I think for the most part, we wouldn't see a typical increase to that degree for any particular sport. But for example, officials' fees do go up every couple of years, and so we account for those. You know, if there were a drastic increase, we would need obviously to approach the board with that. But I think, again, you know, that's really a bigger discussion for the board or the extracurriculars committee. I think at one point in time that was one of the charges of the extracurricular committee, was to look at participation numbers, and you know, when you have activities that have very low participation numbers but higher costs, at what point where is that critical mass? And I think that's a board discussion. At this point, you know, it's our understanding that the activities that we have are those that we are have been, sanctioned by the board, and will continue to fund, and will continue to make those recommendations for funding. But if we see something tremendous happen, as you described, we would certainly bring that back to the board.
Okay. I don't think the extracurricular committee has met since the new board was seated, correct? No. But I know that group had done some work on stipend equity across the sports. We didn't finish the conversation, but we started it. And so, Lisa, I think we left that in your hands, and I'm wondering if you foresee something we need to do that would change the costs here. Like, do we need to bring in people at a higher stipend rate because we need them to be more trained in the safety areas, or anything else you feel we need to address?
I'd like to take another look at that back at committee. We had, and I'm recalling the document that we had started to really try to formulate that formula, and I think we kind of lost that thread. I do think when I look at our stipends, based on my experience overall, I think that they're low. Then when we start looking at how do we create a formula to address those pieces, for example, a sport that has a high risk of injury or liability, with higher levels of training required should pay higher. When we start making those factors part of the equation, we start to see some of those, that in some sports perhaps we are higher than we should be. So trying to not go backwards in those either is sort of that balance. But we do need to continue that work. It's still in progress.
And I brought that up maybe to sort of in response to your question, Nick, is that there are just some sports that are naturally more expensive, not just because of things like equipment, but because the people we need to bring in to support it need to cost more in order to get the right type of people into the program.
Right. That's a good point.
Anything else on this particular topic? Winston.
On the last page, on the back.
You have, Tom.
It says that grand totals for all sports for the year, that 26,000 for the uniforms.
Yes.
So that's divided up amongst all the teams, and that's all new uniforms?
Yes.
And just a point of reference, not all teams got uniforms. There's sort of a replacement cycle.
The money that was spent was spent on new uniforms.
Right. And the grand total also, that in the red, that 240, this is still incomplete. We're still partway through a spring season, so that total is not reflective of the actual cost of the entire year at this point.
I have one last question.
What percentage of our school population in the what is it? This is middle school and high school sports, right? That participate in sports.
It's, if you go back to the previous pages for the participation,
page, right?
It's on each of the pages at the bottom. So if you go to that first page, orange, which is fall, down at the bottom on the left, there's a total students box. So in the fall, we had 124 high school students participate. We had 93 middle school for a total of 217. Out of our beginning of year number of 753, it's 28.81% of the population participated in a fall sport. And then that is repeated for the other 2 seasons.
But you couldn't add these numbers together, right? Same kids and different sports.
Because there's difference between duplicated and unduplicated, yep.
Do you feel, Tom, that's a fair amount of participation of our district, or not district, but the high school and the middle school? Are they really getting out and getting interested in this, or 28% of, was it 753? Was that what was in there?
Yes.
I would obviously like to see more participation. The more the better, I think, for a lot of different reasons. I think our new academic policy plays a little bit into the number as well.
Just anecdotally, the 28.81% is high, in a good way. But if you look comparatively at other systems, that's a pretty decent participation rate.
Lisa?
Yeah, Winston.
You just mentioned something in the participation part of it.
The academic policy?
Academic part. We have policies that we've gone over within the past few years. Are those policies, in your opinion, anything should be changed? Are we too strict? Are we not strict enough on the participation about grades and whatever? because we haven't looked at it now for about 5 or 6 years. It was all new at that time.
I think it actually got changed 2 years ago. We go with a no F. We go with a no F policy now. It's actually shown that it's working out pretty good. I pay attention to the kids' grades every 2 weeks and give them AIP forms and academic intervention plan if their grades are below an F, and then they have 2 weeks to get the F up, and if the F doesn't come up, then they become ineligible to play until it comes back up.
So we are enforcing.
Yep.
I think that's good news for us.
All right.
And if you guys just want a little bit more information about hockey, we do have the girls hockey that do have to pay $650 to go play for Keene, and then we now are a co-op with Fall Mountain. I do see us having 4 or 5 Fall Mountain kids, and they just pay a percentage of what they should owe per kid. So last year was $1,100. We had 1 Fall Mountain player. He had to pay the $1,100. Next year, if we have 5, then we're going to expect them to come up with whatever number it is and pay their part for hockey.
I was just curious if anyone else on the board was troubled by the fact that we have kids paying to play.
They haven't
Who's
been.
asking to speak and who's agreeing with Rob?
I'm asking to speak.
Okay, Nick.
I feel it both ways, Rob. I don't like it when kids, especially if you have a lower income student that doesn't have the money to pay in order to play, because that's what it basically you pay to play. So I see it on I see that on one hand, but then on the other hand, I also see us putting an incredible amount of money into the sport, and at the same time we're reducing teachers. So it's kind of like I'm trying to be fair on both ends and look at it objectively. So that's kind of like what's behind when I'm questioning what do we as a board say is enough as far as how much money that we put into one of these extracurricular activities. And I think that there's got to be a point somewhere where there's a ceiling or some sort of solution to that. It can't just be the cost went up, we're just going to pay it again.
Eric?
Do you want to get into the hockey talk now, or do you want to wait for 2 steps?
I'll let Jeremy decide that.
Yeah, I think jump into it, because the only other thing was to talk about the gate receipts. They're both things that you all asked for last time, so I have no objections going out of order. It doesn't matter to me. If we're in it, let's go for it.
I don't know if people know the background behind hockey, but hockey was here, 10 years ago, 12 years ago. Our first year, Tom was on the team, I think, won a state championship. We existed for probably 4 or 5 years.
Probably 8.
It was 8. Okay, so it was 8 years, and then the participation went away. Then there was a group that came up, I don't know, a few years later, and decided they wanted to try to get the team going again. There's a pretty good youth program, and I don't know that much about it. I'm sure Tom could fill us in. But there's a pretty good youth program in the area, and they really did a lot of work to try to do it. And at that point, they were looking at hockey as, okay, well, we're going to pay XYZ to play anyway, so why don't we just pay that to play at the school? That was kind of what they said. But at that time, it was going to cost about $8,000 a year because it was at the ice arena. It was a beautiful new arena, but the cost doubled. So they agreed to something, but the agreement changed, and it's not any of their fault. It's none of our fault, but the agreement changed because of the ice arena closing, and so that's kind of just how it came about. They've looked at a number of different things to try to do with hockey. When we were looking at extracurricular, we looked, I think it was Conval, Conant, other schools, Hinsdale, I think at one point, trying to combine to try to cut costs and try to do it. But it's really a tough thing to do with the school that far. Now, Fall Mountains, it seems like it's going to work with them. But for the other schools, we couldn't come to an agreement with them at that point. So I think that when the group signed up, that group is, I think, has graduated now, that signed up to do it. But they they signed up with the understanding. We all said that yes, we're going to pay. However, this program has sustained itself. We're one of the top teams in the state again, and not that that's everything, but that's part of it. Is the success. We have a very good program, and I think from our standpoint, we should look at doing something to make it equitable for the hockey team. I just think that that's something we should really take a look at. They've paid their dues. They've come through and they've done what they were going to do for 3 or 4 years now. And they paid actually more than their. We've helped them out last year, I think, but they've paid more than their dues at this point. So I just think we should look at other ways that we could help them out. And if we have to do something, with some of the other teams, that's okay too. We can do something, but I just think it's a lot of money for hockey to have to come up with to play and to represent our school.
And just as a matter of background, it was the NHIA that told us that we couldn't combine with Conval because we had enough players to field a varsity team of our own, as did they.
And we go up divisions and all kinds of things. Yeah, there's a bunch of different things that went behind that.
Anyone else? Right.
I guess for me, 2 pieces. One, I see what you're saying about, you're concerned about somebody paying to play and then feeling like there's responsibility for students to participate at the same time. I'm glad we got to a little bit of the history, right? Because at some point in time, the hockey team didn't go away because it was a money issue, right? The hockey team went away at that point in time because it was just solely a participation just dwindled.
As far as I know, yeah.
Yeah, and I wasn't here, at that time either. So, for me, I support not just athletics. I support anything that gives students, some attention to participate in any group activity that takes their attention away from anything that is, doesn't challenge them as a person, a human being, a better citizen. Academics, right? That's one of the things that we've improved upon. I struggled a little bit, I think, in the beginning, looking at the numbers, how much we pay for hockey versus how many students participate. But, at the end of the day, for me, I support teachers as much as, I support athletics. And again, anything that takes students, attention. I'm open to the conversation about, bringing up the equity, maybe. I think when the board committed to supporting hockey, it was a different conversation. And I don't think that's the board's fault or the students' fault at the same time. So, I think we have gate receipts coming up on that next line there. I support hockey, getting, I don't know if I support hockey getting their gate receipts just like everybody else gives their gate receipts into the gate receipt fund. I'm open to discussing how we fund hockey, but I think that's a big conversation to have about, forking over another $1,000 for every student to participate, fund free to do that.
All right, we don't have a motion on this right now. We could, if someone wanted to make a motion, because we're essentially discussing. Yeah.
I do have something to add to. What if the kids don't pay? What would I have no way to hold them accountable?
So if they just stopped paying?
Yeah. Then what would we do? Because it does get stressful every year when you're not seeing the money come in, and then it starts coming in November, December, January.
That's a great question for Janelle.
Janelle?
Betty was about to ask something.
Yeah, Betty, did you have a question?
I did. Just some clarification. How many kids actually play hockey?
21?
We had 20 this year from the district.
And it's just a varsity team, there's no JV?
No JV, yeah.
And then how many kids play football?
Depends on the year. This year our numbers were really down. There was around 30 kids that played this year.
The championship had 22 kids, right?
Because
I expect next year to have good football numbers.
Okay, well, okay. I was just looking at the total cost, because we totally foot the bill for football, and that's $40,000. And yet we don't totally fund hockey, and that's 26,000. So I was trying to get some idea of like how many more kids are served or things like that.
It's right in the report, so there's 59 kids.
So for this year, it was pretty close, actually, to football numbers and hockey numbers.
59 and 20.
Yeah, because you have middle school there too, Betty.
Oh, correct,
You
yeah.
have middle school with football.
Yep. They're a
That's
part
how
of
you
that.
get 59, so 27 are high school.
Okay.
Do you think the hockey numbers would increase if the players knew that there was no pay to play?
Yes, I definitely do. I think it would increase for the girls as well.
Is there a reason the girls can't play for our team?
They can, but there was a push to have them play with the girls, so that's what we did. We gave them that option to have.
Scott?
What is our current agreed split with the hockey boosters, percentage-wise?
I couldn't hear you. What?
What's the agreed percentage split? We're funding what percentage and they're funding what percentage?
It's a flat dollar amount. We're funding 9,800-ish.
Yep, that's it.
We're funding 9,800?
And that went up, right? A couple of years ago, it was like 70.
It was a temporary increase. It was the board action to provide supplemental funding at least 1 or 2 years in a.
I don't think it happened for this year.
No, it didn't happen for this year, but in the years past.
Yeah.
It was, I believe, in maybe last year, it was unallocated fund balance, or maybe that was the year before.
I think it was the surplus.
It was
Or
an emergency
That's the thing.
action
Yeah.
because of the increase in ice time, or the ice cost. Yeah, Brian?
So let's say we fully funded hockey. What number, at one point would we have to add a second team where the number we're seeing at 26, like that ice time? I assume ice time goes into fees, right, at 15.6 or so. So we're talking a second team, twice the ice time.
I don't think we could even get the ice time. So I don't see us ever having 2 teams anyway, and if that were the case, we'd just get rid of Fall Mountain.
Like you said, it's only one.
We've done a little bit of forecasting with hockey, and the numbers look like it'll be pretty consistent with, 3 or 4 kids per class.
And Tom, when you say when we would drop Fall Mountain, we would be forced to anyway, wouldn't we? Because
Yeah.
you can't make a cut from a Monadnock student to keep a Fall Mountain, is that correct?
Yeah, so every 2 years we have to re-up with Fall Mountain anyway, so they would take a look at that and say, no, that probably wouldn't work anymore.
Scott?
Make the motion to fund hockey at 100%.
Second.
All right, and under discussion, I'll call on Jeremy first and then Lisa.
Hold on, it was Scott and.
Okay, Lisa can go first and then
Okay.
Jeremy.
I just totally forgot. So just for point of clarification, where would those funds come from?
Yeah.
Would that be unallocated fund balance? Because this wasn't something that was budgeted in the budget for 18-19. So I just did for clarity.
I'm just here to put the motion on the table.
Well played.
That's what you hired Janelle for. Find it.
Well, not quite. It needs to be, has to come from somewhere else.
Janelle and then Jeremy and then Winston and then Brian.
Is the motion for 18-19, or are you also including it for this year?
We've had this discussion before related to ice hockey, so I do believe we need to work our way through 2 motions. My motion is for 18-19. I then
Thank
think
you.
we need a separate motion to deal with the budget process for future years.
Jeremy, it's your turn.
Tom, I was just going to ask, you and I talked about this a little bit, I'm trying to remember. Is there any concern this year that the boosters don't have the money to pay for the ice time?
No, everything is accounted for at this time.
Thank you.
Winston?
Would that mean we'd buy the skates for these kids?
They provide their own equipment.
I know, but if we fund everything, are we gonna have to buy them their skates? I'd be willing to fund the hockey program, if you said each one has to have $600 in, I'd be more than willing to include that in the cost. But every kid would want a different pair of skates. And they got to be the right ones for each person.
I think it would be similar to what we require each kid to get their own spikes for football, soccer, basketball has to get their own shoes. As far as hockey, I think they'd have to get their own equipment.
Yeah, but you said fund hockey 100%.
So it's a good point.
Similar manner to other sports.
in a similar manner to other sports.
I agree with that.
He just made a friendly amendment to his own motion. All right, Nick.
I think it's really irresponsible to do this, especially when you have year-end asked administration where the funds are going to come from. I mean, what sort of additional impact is this going to have on the budget? Do we even know? It's kind of like saying, yeah, let's do that and not have any context for what it costs or what it's going to take away because we already have a set budget.
A little bit like a motion to table, but it didn't really come out that way.
I'm not motioning to table it. I'm going to vote against it.
All right, Brian.
You take a friendly to change a motion to fully fund for next budget year.
No, because I believe that should be a separate motion.
Neil.
I heard the answer, but I didn't hear the answer. What year are you trying to fund, right now or next year?
18-19.
17,000.
And you're gonna fund it for 27,000?
Yes.
And then just Fall Mountain would have to be responsible for some of that, depending on how many players they have.
Surplus, but she's gotta find $27,000.
No, she would have to find 27,000 minus
9,800.
Right.
How many Fall Mountain players do we have this year?
We had just one, but there was 4 freshmen, or there's going to be 4 freshmen next year, I believe, that are going to play for us.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else?
Where did you get that 27,000?
From Tom.
I got off the Steve just rounded it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What about that $600 that students are paying?
That's all fundraised.
So that would
They're
stop.
boosters.
Yeah, but again,
They would pay for their own
I
equipment.
included that, that's around, at 20 people, that's roughly, what, $12,000 that the parents are paying. And you said you wanted to fund hockey.
Go ahead.
In addition, with this motion, this line on this budget does not reflect what, for the girls who are playing for Keene, correct?
Correct.
So I would recommend thinking about Title IX. If we're going to fully fund the boys program and we're going to provide girls with opportunities to play somewhere else but ask them to pay, that we may want to craft a motion that addresses that.
I need a clarification on what you did. You mean this $27,000 did not cover the girls?
That played at Keene.
Lady
No.
King didn't cover that?
No, and the $27,000 is not what the district gave us.
No, I know, it's the total of all these numbers, right?
Yes, it's the total cost to
Total
run the
cost.
program.
Right.
Total cost to the district to run the program.
The boys.
We know they're buying their
No.
own skates,
Yes.
uniforms.
And they paid back they're going to pay back about 16,000 of that 27,000 out of the boosters, Neil.
So how much does it cost the girls to go to Keene?
$650.
I think we can absorb that in payment and let the boys pay a couple of bucks.
How many girls go to Keene, though?
We had 2 this year, but next year I don't see us having any.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions?
There's a motion on the floor.
Yes, and the motion is to fund hockey in a manner that is similar to other sports for the 18-19 season.
Could I just clarify to make sure the girls are included in that statement?
And you'd have to make a
You'd have to
motion
make an
to
amendment.
For a second motion.
I've just asked for a clarification. If you want me to amend it, I will.
We would have to take an amendment if you wanted to
I make a
state that.
motion to amend it to include the girls going to Keene.
Is there a second for the
Second.
amendment? That's Rob for the second. Let's go ahead and vote on the amendment.
Just a question.
Yeah.
Have we decided how we're funding this? Because the budget's already.
We have to vote on it.
It'll be for the next
That'll
budget
be
year.
this, that'll
coming
be the
in now.
second.
18-19 is already set.
We've already said it.
Janelle will bring us a transfer next week,
So-
2 weeks.
So for your benefit,
Thank you.
because we've done this in other areas, not just sports, but if we vote to approve the amendment and vote to approve the motion, and we're saying we were funding 9,800 and now we're going to fund this other amount, we're then sort of putting the squeeze on the administration to say, find the money. Because the master budget is set. We can't go bigger than the overarching number, but they then have to find it from other lines and transfer dollars from here or there. Or if there's unencumbered funds at the end of the year, we can make a motion to facilitate it that way.
It's basically 20 grand.
Let's go ahead and vote on the amendment first. I think this will be the easy piece, and then we'll come back. All right? So all in favor of adding the potentially 0 girls into this motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
1 abstention.
Just Nick.
Thank you.
All right. Now, we're moving on to the core motion, which now reads as to fund hockey in a similar manner as other sports and include the girls that may like to play for Keene.
Roll call, please.
Roll call.
And Jeremy, a roll call vote on this.
Kristen?
No.
Wynn?
Yes.
Neil?
No.
Nick?
No.
Brian?
No.
Rob?
Yes.
Sherry left. Eric?
Yes.
Betty?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
6.474 yes, 3.525 no.
Okay, so the motion passes. Will you share the news?
Sure, that's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Receipts?
Thanks.
So the last piece was gate receipts that you asked for information on. So I asked Tom if he could just tell you the process now, and I can say that he and Janelle have started started speaking about moving forward. So go ahead, Tom.
Just from the past, the gate receipt account has been the AD's account, from everything I understand. And things bought out of that account need to be kind of like an all sports purchase.
I was trying to get my hand up after the vote that was just taken. Can you come back to the board whenever you guys figure out where that additional 20,000 is coming from, so we can have an understanding of the impact that just had on the other area of our budget? Thank you.
Eric? Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we fund that 20,000 from any excess funds at the end of the budget year, if there are funds available.
Okay. Is there a second for that?
And I don't want to say the 20,000, but the extra money for hockey. I don't want to put a number to that.
Second.
Scott is the second. Is there any discussion on funding that from the? Yes.
So am I to understand this correctly, that we will not, if we don't have this additional money left over, that we're not going to fund it?
I don't think we can.
That wasn't my motion.
No.
Every way I
Chris said
understand it.
It would come from that
the
if it
fund
was
balance
available.
if we have it. We can't
Right.
reserve the fund balance unless we say that we're going to do that. We can't just grab money out of that.
So what is the purpose of this?
Because we can't use that money unless we designate it for something like this.
Right. But they're going to have to make some sort of accounting decision at some point that I assume is going to occur before the end of the year, and you know what the remaining fund balance is.
They'll probably have a good idea what the fund
No,
balance is.
we wouldn't need to make that determination beforehand.
Okay, so we're not going to pay, you guys aren't going to budget this item, you're just going to wait to see if you have the money?
It's for the 18-19 year.
Right.
I mean,
I fully understand that.
We'll look and see where it would come from if there was not unallocated fund balance available. I mean, that would be prudent, so we will do that. But hopefully there will be, if this motion passes and there is unallocated fund balance, then we'll have gone through the exercise, but we won't need to implement it.
Okay.
Betty?
So the unallocated funds, if we identify how we're going to use them, we can carry them past July 1st?
Yes.
That's how we did the auditorium and
That's
things,
how we
Betty, in the
did some of
past.
the others.
Welcome to the club, Betty.
How we did scoreboards, I think, various things. All right, Scott.
Back to the topic at hand. Actually, we need to vote on that. I shouldn't interrupt, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we were just about to take a roll call vote on that.
Can you repeat the motion?
So who has the motion? Eric.
I made the motion to take the money to fund hockey from any excess funds at the end of the year, if they are available.
This
This year, if they are
Yeah,
available.
present, yeah.
FY17.
Yep.
Or 18.
18.
All right, go ahead, Jeremy.
Kristen?
Yes.
Wynn?
Yes.
Neil?
No.
Nick?
No.
Brian?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Betty?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
8.710. 1.28.
Now back to the topic at hand.
So now we're talking about gate receipts again.
What's the current balance in your gate receipt fund, and how much do you normally spend?
I believe we have around $30,000 in that account with this year's gate receipts. I bought the Paul Breckel sign out of that. I bought a popcorn machine for the Husky House for that. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah, Rob.
I don't want to go down a rabbit hole of a different subject, but when we do signs and things like that, sponsorship dollars, does that go into that account?
If we're fundraising for something, I guess it could. I mean, like the Paul Breckel sign, we did a dinner, and whatever we allocated from the dinner went back into the...
No, I'm talking about like when I see signs on the baseball fence or the softball fence or in the walls of the gym, when we're,
Sponsors?
Yeah, where's that? Where do the sponsor dollars go to that account?
No.
Many of those are booster sponsors, so a lot of the boosters do sponsorships to raise funds for their organizations.
So they go into the booster organization of the specific sport or whatever.
Mhm.
Okay.
In most cases.
Thank you.
Do you have a wish list of things that you wanted to buy with the AD fund?
I mean, I just see a need for new scoreboards out on our playing fields outside, especially baseball and softball. I think it's going to be a summer project for me to try to get some fundraising done for those and get a good sponsorship for each scoreboard. I do plan to work on getting a baseball and softball scoreboard this summer.
Eric?
And Tom, if you do something on, like the baseball field, because I know we use that for lacrosse and we use it for field hockey, can we implement so it has timing and everything on it too, so they can be used for multiple sports?
Yeah, and that's something I've looked into. Field hockey is actually going to require a timer that everybody can see. It can't just be held by the official anymore. So if we do get a new scoreboard, I'd put a timer on top of it so that they could utilize it as well. That's not big enough.
All right, any other questions? Do you see any negative impact if we were to have gate receipts go back to the respective sports? Do you have an opinion on that?
I just think it's unfair for like soccer and baseball to not have the chance to get gate receipts. They don't really draw a crowd. Football's obviously going to draw a crowd. It's Friday night. They have the lights. Basketball, we're indoors where no one wants to be outdoors, and it's kind of nice to take in a game during that time. Same with ice hockey. So those are the only 4 sports we take gates for. And it's really not fair to those other sports because they don't have a need to take a gate, I guess.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for Tom? Sorry we kept you so late.
That's all right.
You're waiting.
That's all right.
Really appreciate you being here.
God bless you all for doing the job that you guys do.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, Tom. Thanks.
All right. That brings us to committee reports then, and Karen is not here for Finance and Facilities. Is there anyone from Finance and Facilities that'd like to give us an overview or any highlights of the most recent meeting?
Oh, God, I was there too. No, but I left early. Neil, you were there the whole time. I left
You
early.
did a great job, Rob. I didn't make any notes.
Okay.
I would table.
I didn't expect her not to be here, so I didn't write any notes down.
All right, we'll pass that by for now then. Education met as well.
Yes, we did. Jeremy reported out academic successes. Ferry Beach talked about the high-stake testing that's going on, and about that the maker spaces isn't really STEAM, but it's prepping kids to learn how to think in that way. Is that right?
Say it again. So it's not by it's not STEAM. I mean, we don't just teach STEAM for 30 minutes a week. STEAM is an idea that is incorporated into our whole curriculum. Makerspace is a place to really explore and experiment with STEAM concepts in a free zone, basically. That's the whole purpose of Makerspace, is to tinker and to have the opportunity to play and fail. Yep.
Missy Suarez and Audrey Saltzman came, shared with us the new teacher evaluation plan and the changes they've made, and it looked to me like we've kind of not totally gone back to the Danielson model that has the 4 teaching domains and rubrics of what those domains look like, but it's more that way. And Jeremy said that the other way that we've been using the last few years was more just, I never used that system, but just checking off boxes.
Yeah. So yeah, okay. The model that we're going back to is very much the Danielson model.
Yeah.
It's the updated Danielson model. With education evaluation, there's really, there's lots of them out there, but there's a few big ones that everyone uses. And we had been using Rebus, which was one of them over the last few years. And the committee that was studying the evaluations didn't feel that it was holistic enough or really gave teachers an opportunity to self-reflect and to meet with their evaluator to improve their practice. So the Danielson model that's been updated really allows for that deep reflection from both the evaluator and the teacher to improve their practice and to not only identify what's working, but to identify what's not working and to come up with a plan to move forward as a professional.
And then homework policy is now being sent to the policy committee. Jeremy went back one more time and was still getting positive feedback from various constituencies. So I think once policy looks at it, we'll have a new homework policy. And we were asked to look at the class size, IHB. And the consensus pretty much was that in this district we have materials. We don't go short on materials. Class sizes. At times there's a need for more time and more staffing. And both Missy and Audrey said that looks like there's a bubble coming along in the K through 2 grades. They're bigger classes again, and so just something to be thinking about and maybe anticipating. And that was really pretty much all we talked about with the class size issue.
Could I ask a question about Makerspace? Is that on our 6-day rotation? Is that the STEM day?
It's not the STEM. No, so only Gilsum has a STEM day. Makerspace is a special. We're using it as a special in our 6-day rotation.
Okay, so, but it says STEM on the paper.
Yeah.
Oh, is that
So
that goes home to
parents know
parents?
it
Are
as
they calling
STEM.
it STEM instead? Yeah. Okay. I haven't seen those particular papers, but yes, that's what that would be.
That's cool. So when I'm talking to my son, I can say, "Did you have fun in Makerspace today?" And he'll know what that means.
Definitely.
Okay, because STEM kind of gets a blank stare.
And that's it?
Did you have something?
Yeah, a question for Education Committee. When you looked at IHB, did the committee come to the conclusion that we're compliant with both state laws for class size and our own guidelines for class size?
We are compliant with state, but in some places we're not with our own district policies. Because our own district policies ask for smaller classes than what the state will allow.
Specifically, we spoke about what happened at Emerson. Yeah.
Well, Emerson and Troy both.
Is that the 27 student class?
Yeah. And they're continuing on up through in that really big class.
So.
And we discussed briefly too the verbiage of the current policy, where it's very wordy, but it says in more than one way we strive versus setting that hard and fast line. And as far as we just clarified, there's not state law governing governing class size. They're state guidelines, and we're within those guidelines by and large, with the exception of that one.
All right, Nick.
So just to build on that, if we have a board policy that recommends that we have a certain class size, why are we outside of that? And at what point, if it is something that's gray or flexible, at what point do we say enough is, this is too much?
I think, based on what the administrators that were in the room, they're concerned about space. If they were, where would they put another class of kindergarten, or, because that's the main area, kindergarten through 2 is supposed to be 19 kids. And we're vastly exceeding that in some places. Well, maybe vastly is an overstatement, but as I've been thinking about it, and we didn't talk about this at the meeting, I've been wondering if we should put, if a class goes above 19 in those grade levels, should we automatically put a general aid in that room? It would give you another pair of hands, another person to help, because
I'm just going to let Jeremy respond to that.
Just to go along with that, Betty, one of the things that we talked about is that some of those classes, so let's say we're at 21 or 22, if we split that into 2, now we're vastly out of whack on the other end based on the board policy. So we're in a funny place with some of these classes where we're right there, and we're trying to figure that out, and what's the best way to go with that.
So there's a minimum class size?
Yeah, there's a range.
under 10, right? There's an under 10 policy classes?
That's
You
at
have
the
to-
high school
You have to
level.
report them. Is it
Right.
just high school?
Yeah,
It-
but
those
there's
are
a
high school
range for the
classes
classes that we're trying to stick within it. So
But at kindergarten level, when we say 19, there's, I don't remember reading a board policy that says, you can't have a class that's this small at the kindergarten level.
No, I don't either.
Right.
There are no minimums on the policy,
Right.
but instead of
I'm
26, you'd
going
have
with the-
13 and
okay.
13, so. Neil?
Yeah, I think when the policy committee looks at this, they should talk to the principals. Kids go in and out of those classrooms left and right. I go there every Wednesday. There's 18 kids in the class. I guarantee there will be a change in that 3 or 4 times before I leave in 1 hour. Kids are leaving, going off to a reading teacher. A reading teacher comes in and grabs 3 or 4 and sits them down. So I think you ought to talk to the principals and see what you should be using for a number. Or come at 1 o'clock Wednesday and watch. You won't believe it. It's nothing like the old days where you had a class and they all sat there all day.
I know Kevin Stone did report to the Education Committee how he is meeting the needs of the kids in those big classes. And some of it is using, reading teachers coming in or
Sending
other.
off 3 to 1 reading teacher, and let's see, and this is guaranteed, happens every Wednesday. 3 or 4 go out to a reading teacher. A reading teacher comes into the classroom and grabs 3. Okay, forget me reading to the kids, and then the regular teacher reads to another group. Another group of kids grabs their computers and says, do this, this, and this. We're measuring the wrong thing. 'Cause none of them are doing the same thing. I don't know if that lasts all day or not. Like I said, I bank a lot on the 1 hour, but.
Nick?
I guess my concern with it is, as a parent, I would be upset if my student was in that 27-student class. I'd be furious with that. And if we're going to have a policy that says 19 for kindergarten, and you're that far over, I guess I would question a budget that doesn't include enough teaching staff to meet those ratios.
I'll respond to that. My son is in the 26 first graders class, and he comes home every day saying that there are paraprofessionals that are in the class that are helping too. He knows more than one adult in his classroom.
But doesn't the policy say there's a student-teacher ratio, not student-paraprofessional ratio?
Yes.
Okay, so that I would.
And aren't those paraprofessionals actually in place to help specific students, not as general class aides?
And if you've been in the classroom when they're taking a few out and they're bringing a few in, it's very chaotic. It's a good workaround.
The kids love it.
But I don't know if it's if a smaller group of children in the classroom, if we could somehow do it, I think would still be beneficial.
Just it's not a workaround. Just to speak to
Well,
that, it's targeted intervention and kind of pinpointing what we need to do for kids that Neil's probably seeing when he comes in. It's probably during a time where we're trying to meet kids at each group level. It's what I was talking to with Rob last year. I just want to be. I know there's chaos with it, absolutely, but I do want to be fair to that and say that some of that moving around has nothing to do with numbers. It has everything to do with student needs at that time and using the resources that we have appropriately. Instead of having a whole group lesson, there are times when we need to look at kids individually and say, you need these skills, and this is what we're going to work. So I just want to make sure
my point was that it's not 27 kids sitting in the classroom. I don't think that classroom would be either. Based on what I see, there's not 27 kids sitting in that room for 6 hours by themselves without one teacher. Not happening.
Not at the lower grades, definitely not.
Scott.
So I think there's an interesting conundrum here that really goes back to what we talked about at the beginning of the meeting. And that is, we've been talking for a couple years now about our population and enrollment decline. Yet we have taken on full-day kindergartens and multiple levels of preschool. If we were to try to honor this policy to the letter, where would we put them? We have a space premium problem within our current buildings. So how is it that we feel like, the population's down, yet it's because we've taken on more grades, so to speak. That's my first initial observation, but I would hope that we could do something with this policy, not to change it necessarily, but maybe to enforce it, so that if for any class we're going to hit a certain clip level, the board is alerted. If we're going to hit a next clip level, then we're obligating ourselves to take some action. And I don't know what that is, because it seems like a sticky problem, but seems like we kind of ignore it.
Nick.
At the very least, I think it could be addressed at the student-teacher ratio. So if that means having an additional teacher, certified teacher in the room that can help, that's a start.
So that's what our reading specialists and our interventionists are doing quite a bit of, and being that additional. So it's not always paraprofessional support you're seeing. We do have interventionists and reading specialists who are certified teachers that are usually, most of them are dual certified with classroom teacher and their specialists. All the interventionists are, and they are in those rooms helping with those numbers. It's not that I don't think that I want smaller classes. I taught a class of 27. It's hard. It's really hard. But it's that we have to really, there's a lot, it's a bigger conversation. That's all I'm saying, is that it's not as simple as just saying that the number is too high, that we have to really look at a lot of things with it. And how many, it's not adding an additional teacher, but if we have 3 classes that are over that number, so that's 3 teachers for that building, 3 teachers for another building, so now you're up to 6. Premium is, space is a premium in some buildings and not in others. Emerson's had up to 10 classrooms before. But Troy right now is pretty full. So I just think it's a very big conversation.
All right.
Okay.
Brian?
Yep.
Yeah.
Just so I have something at the end of our policy class size for education if we're done. That's it.
All right. Are there any other? Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to ask the Education Committee to continue to take this up. It feels like we need to dig harder.
Okay. Yeah.
And I know I'm probably beating a dead horse, but those for K through 2, they haven't developed independent work habits in many cases. They just need a lot of supervision so they get off on the right foot. And having all-day kindergarten, I think you're compromising it if the kids don't have enough help from adults.
Okay. Does that wrap up our conversation on class size?
Motion didn't get a second.
Second.
Okay. Kristen's the second for the motion. And we're sending that back to the Education Committee. Okay. All in favor?
Could I hear the motion, please?
To refer this policy back to education to work on it more.
All right.
On the class size.
Yes.
Any discussion on sending it back to education? Nick?
Yeah, I would like to, I think we have a policy in place. I would like to see the administration act on that policy. Unless you're talking about changing the policy, otherwise why have the policy if you're not going to follow the policy? What's the point?
The policy says strive. We'll make efforts. It's not a hard and fast. And so we do strive. We do make sure that we have extra, if we have paraprofessional support or if we know we can get another certified teacher in the room to help out. So in my view, we are meeting the policy because we are meeting the spirit of the way it's written. So I think if there's a desire to have that be more of a hard line, I think it does have to be a policy discussion.
So in that sense, I'd like to see it go to policy rather than education. Or if you want to send it to education and have them talk over it and send it to policy.
As the motion maker and as the policy chair, I would prefer to get, if we're going to imply or create any kind of a stricter guideline beyond strive, I would like education and administration to work together to come up with those lines rather than policy doing it in a vacuum.
All right. Any other discussion on this motion? All in favor of sending this back to education?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Abstentions? And that was Rob silently giving an abstention.
Thank you.
Yep. All right.
Can I make a motion we get coffee?
Coffee for the meetings? That doesn't have to be an official motion.
I second that.
I've been saying it for years.
You're the chair now. Let's go.
All right.
Let's do it.
7.757.
Alrighty then.
2 questions.
Yes.
For education. So, my first question, where are we with implementing STEAM in all schools?
They all have the maker spaces in all elementary schools. And you're currently, do you want to speak to
Yeah,
what
so
you're
I
doing
spoke
at
to
the
this.
high
I spoke to this at the beginning of the year, and I'm happy to go back and send some of this. But at this summer, we had a group, a team from every single school work together with a STEAM consultant, Yvonne Spicer, out of the Museum of Science, and each group created a STEAM action plan based on a rubric that was created by her to look at what we're currently doing and how we're going to go forward. All the schools did that. They put that action plan into place. The principals are monitoring it. At the end of the year, we're going to examine those action plans together and decide what are our next steps for each school and how do we continue this idea of becoming a model STEAM school, so to say. Because there's different levels on that rubric of, we're beginning. We do some of these things to this is embedded in our practice, and it's broken down into 15 different things that you would look for if you were really implementing STEM or STEAM into your schools. So we're making progress, and we're with it. We have action plans that we are currently working.
We had 2 people trained for 2 years, right, by Yvonne?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Any plans for a 3rd year?
Yvonne is the mayor of Framingham now, so I don't know if she's doing any consulting work right now. But we are still working with Keene State to continue training, and they're really, the Southwest Center at Keene State, they're really supporting us and helping us with consultants and materials.
And you said we've been going to Winchester too, because they've had a long-standing program.
Yep, and that breaks specifically into the makerspace concept of STEAM. Debbie Black is a professor at Keene State. She's working with the Winchester School, and they've really made big strides in their makerspace. And we just talked the other day on the phone. We're going to do a 2-day with them in the summer where we're going to go to them. Our people who are working in our makerspaces are going to go to them for 1 day and then come back to us for the next day, and they're going to come up and do some consulting with us and help us take that next step that, yes, the makerspace time is a good time to tinker, and then the next step is how do we connect it to the curriculum so that the teachers are saying, hey, I want to use makerspace during my time today. Can I come in and use those materials in that space and really connect it? I'd also like to say, publicly that the Southwest Center, through their SAHI grant, which is Title II grant, purchased us some really outstanding resources, some books for each of our libraries and the people doing those maker spaces that Winchester's been using. And it was, you know, they did 2 books each. I think it was about $300 per library, so it was a really nice give from Keene State to help us keep pushing forward with this.
You also have some, is it Lego robotics that's going into the middle school?
Yeah, yep. So using our own Title VI funds, we're buying things to get into the hands. So Paul Lucas, I shared with you guys at this, I don't remember when, but he really was looking at the technology, the computer technology curriculum, and wanted to add robotics in a big way. And this is where it gets really confusing, because there's the robotics club, which is VEX Robotics, which is a thing, and then there's our VEX classes, which are also going to be doing robotics. So we have VEX Robotics and Robotics in VEX, and we purchased 11 or 12. It was a bunch sets. Lego robot sets that Paul's going to be using. He's testing them out with some high school classes this year, and it's going to be part of his VEX classes for next year. And again, we were able to do that through grant funds, and that's going to be a big part. We also, I told you guys about the Farm Bot, which is a programmable agricultural machine that should be coming in anytime now. It's supposed to ship in May. It's purchased. It's ready to go. So there's a lot. There's a lot of pieces, and all those connect to those bigger STEAM action plans.
Well, the reason I ask, you know, we're coming up on year 4 of our 5-year commitment about keeping Gilsum open. And part of that conversation consisted of us giving the district some time to bring STEAM to the other schools in the district. So I think it's important for us to start that conversation now about what we want to do at the end of year 5, so we don't, you know, come up to 6 and 7 and continue to have conversations while we're trying to change the footprint of the school if we haven't given, you know, fair time. My confusion, I think, would be of how we voted to keep that school open at that time. You know, so if we're at a time where we haven't had that discussion yet again, and I think it's time for us to start, you know, we're coming up on the end of year 4 now, and you know, if we're not making as much progress as we wanted to, what do we need to do for it?
Okay. Are there any other questions on this topic? No? All right. Moving along, we will go to the policy committee report.
So a question for you. Policy has 6 policies up for second read tonight, but they weren't listed. So is that just an agenda oversight, and can we take them up, or do we need to vote them out for the agenda, or what do we do?
I'm not sure. It must have been an agenda oversight.
You can take them up, you just need 2/3 vote.
So I'll make a motion to amend the agenda to include our 6 policies that are up for second read.
Second.
Everyone has digital copies of those policies, right?
We're going to see if I have them.
And Kristen, I have paper copies here if you need them. You have them? Okay. Is there anyone who doesn't have copies of these policies?
Those would have been in your April 3rd meeting packet.
This is the mega packet.
Mega packet.
Mega packet number 1.
Yes.
The 27.
Which one do you want to move first? Or did you move all of them?
We need a motion to amend the agenda. We have a second. We need a 2/3 vote.
All right, all in favor of amending the agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions. Okay, so that passes. We are amending.
Okay. So before we just put the motion out there and vote, we have these 6 policies. I can rattle off their names and titles if you like, but we have these 6 policies up for second read. And does anyone feel we need to take any of them separately, or can we move all 6 of them together?
I'd appreciate if we take them separately. We also have people watching from YouTube.
Okay.
So
YouTube
just,
land.
just so that we can name each one.
Okay. So the first one we'll take then is second read for policy EHB, which is data records and retention. And the spirit of this change is to adapt to some RSA changes regarding special education record retention. Kristen?
I have a friendly amendment to the policy, and I typed it out at Scott's request. There are 4 instances of where only guardian or guardians is used, and I'm sorry, only parent or parents is used, and I feel that it should be added to a backslash and guardians in those instances so that it would be parents or guardians. As reflected in other proposed policies, such as policy IGE, which we're doing later. And then also, in the 3rd paragraph, there's a sentence that's quite awkward. It looks like a typo. So I wrote it out here, what the original sentence would be, which is the district shall inform parents when personally identifiable information collected, maintained, or used under related to providing special education for their student is no longer needed to provide educational services to the child. The proposed change is listed on my paper that I'm passing out, highlighted in yellow, and the new sentence would be the district shall inform parents or guardians when personally identifiable information that was collected, maintained, or used to provide special education for their student is no longer needed to provide education services to the child.
So I do take that as friendly. What's happened here is, the motion is to adopt NHSBA's policy as recommended. And so when, as a committee, we did that, we really didn't inspect the grammar too closely. So a little bit of a wag on NHSBA for what they wrote, and a little bit of wag on us for not, going deep line by line on it. So I think her corrected sentence makes sense, and adding the /guardian in all those places makes sense as well.
Nick?
Yeah, this is a great example of why people shouldn't take NHSBA as, it's dogma, don't follow it to the letter.
All right, any other comments on this before we vote?
You don't have a second.
Second.
Who is this?
Thank you.
All right, all in favor of
As amended, right?
as amended, EHB as amended?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? All right, EHB is done.
Okay. The next one is policy IGE, parental objections to specific course content. And the change to this policy is to accommodate updated RSA as to providing the 2 weeks advance notice regarding specific types of education like special education.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
So what's being changed, or are you just adopting this wholesale?
We are adopting this wholesale. When and where possible, when we're not seeing anything conflicting with the spirit of our own policies, we're adopting the NHSBA language because it makes our future audits and our compliance much cleaner.
All right, any other discussion on this?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd be against this policy, because I think it's critical information that all students should have, regardless of
It's required by
opinion.
law.
It is?
This is the old one.
There was an RSA that passed in the 2017 legislative season.
Do we have to adopt it as a policy, though?
Yes, the RSA is the district will adopt a policy that.
Does it quote the RSA in the policy?
Yes.
The reason I'm asking is because if the policy gets a new RSA, then what are you gonna do?
Yeah, right. It's on page 2, RSA 18611.
Okay. No, I just didn't bring with me.
Yeah.
This is state?
Yes.
Figures.
All right. Any other discussion? All in favor of adopting policy IGE as written?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention?
Abstain.
Okay. IHAM, Health Education and Exemption from Instruction. This is a very similar policy, and it's being updated to accommodate the exact same RSA change, RSA 18611. This one does have the appropriate parents/legal guardians throughout, and it talks about the idea that we need to have an opt-out form available and the lead time in notifying parents.
Second.
All right. Any discussion on IHAM?
What's the footnote? NHSBA note. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, this is the note by which, how and when and why NHSBA is notifying us that we need to update our policy. So you recall, policy committee's working through a big backlog. So this comes from their September 2017 legislative bulletin update. And it adds this new 4th paragraph as to the when and how we need to notify parents.
All right. All in favor of adopting IHAM as amended?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay. I know that we said we want to take each of these individually, but the next 3, I'll take a stab at doing them all at once. They are variations of policy IHBA. So there's IHBAA, IHBAA-R, and IHBA-R. Currently, we have extensive policies that talk about how we deal with procedural safeguards for children with disabilities, how we do special education evaluation procedures, etc. And based on the bulletin update from 2016, what is recommended by NHSBA is that we no longer try to spell out the letter of the law in all this great detail, because this is now handled inside the New Hampshire Code of Administrative Rules. There's a whole policy book and binder that says, for Kathy Wood's organization and everybody in it, this is how you do the job. You don't need to spell out a policy that goes through it. This is the guidebook. So the change to the policy is actually to adopt it all the way down to a very simple paragraph that says we will ensure that all evaluation procedures honor the federal guidelines. So it makes it really clean. So I'd like to move all 3 of these policies together.
Second.
All right. Any discussion on this? Okay.
I don't really understand it, but I'm going to vote for it.
Want me to go
Have you ever
deeper?
seen me come with the purple book? It's like this big. It's the New Hampshire Rules for Educating Children with Disabilities. Everything that we're supposed to do is in that book. So we don't need to have it in the policy, because if the book changes, we would have to change the policy every time.
Do we have anything that goes above and beyond the book?
IDEA, which is the federal law, but that's only reauthorized like every 10 years. We're overdue. So when IDEA gets reauthorized, then the New Hampshire rules will get rewritten. And then we'll still be referencing those rules.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just as a point of reference, the New Hampshire rules exceed IDEA in many cases.
Yes, they do.
Scott, can you list out the policies for us?
Yes. IHBAA-R, which is Special Education Evaluation Procedures. IHBA, that's only one A, -R, which is Procedural Safeguards for Children with Disabilities. And good old IHBAA, Learning Disabilities Evaluation.
Thank you.
All right. So, all in favor of adopting these 3 policies as a batch?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And abstentions? Good.
Policy Committee meets this coming Tuesday. We're at the SAU at 5 o'clock. We have 15 to 20 that we're going to crank through again. And the homework policy is on the front of the list,
Thank you.
as are meeting minutes.
What about Neil's?
Hmm?
What about Neil's?
As are meeting minutes.
Oh.
All right.
I think that's the most policies we've done so far.
Ranking through the backlog. We're down to 117 left.
That's a discussion for policy.
Changes to the
You
law.
can make a motion to refer that to policy.
Committee.
We should have a policy on the number of policies we can have on the policy list. All right. Finalize committee meeting times. So we'll have to wait for finance and facilities after they split up and have their individual meetings to decide how we will divvy up times for them. However, we do have a list of the other policy committee meeting, the other committee meeting times that we suspect is correct. Let me know if we've got anything that is not. Let's see.
Listen,
We know when the school board and when the budget committee meets, yes.
don't we have a policy that says that the committee chairs are the ones that set the meeting times?
We've asked the committee chairs to set the meeting times. Many of the committees haven't responded to Lillian. We can't wait any longer to find out when these committees are going to meet. So,
Okay, so it's still up to the policy chairs to make those, to the committee chairs to make those determinations. We're kind of going over a policy again.
You gonna tell them about the CCC meeting? I don't know about it.
all right, so the only ones that are really up in the air is education, that's set, finance and facilities, that's split, so we know that we need a new time for either finance or facilities.
And education and facilities are also going to be increasing the frequency of the meeting times. So, there you go.
Have these committees all met and elected their new chairs?
No. Or I haven't been invited if that's the case.
And community relations and extracurricular have not yet set their first meetings. This is not good.
No, because I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this. It says on even months. So if we adopt this the way it is tonight, we don't meet until June.
For who?
Odd months, first
Yeah.
Tuesday on even months?
On the even months. So our first Tuesday in May happens to be a fifth month. I would suggest that we just revise that to begin with the May, first meeting in May, and then follow the schedule thereafter.
All right, so first Tuesday in May. For CRC or extracurricular? And do these committees want to meet only every other month? Okay, who's on CRC?
I am.
Sherry's the current chair.
Betty, Kristen, and Sherry. Who else is on CRC? Of the
Sherry,
members who are here now, we need to have a decision about when your first meeting is going to happen.
For CRC?
Yeah.
What was the prior schedule?
This is it. This was the prior schedule that was set last year.
No, I mean, what Tuesday of the month was CRC?
The first Tuesday on odd months.
Sherry sent an email asking us if May 1st from 5 to 6 would work.
That's what I had suggested.
For CRC, though.
Oh, no, the one?
That was for CRC.
May 1st, 5 to 6.
Can I make a motion? Can I make a motion that all the committees outside of the board meeting set a date, let's say, before the end of the month to get together? For their first meeting to elect a chair, even if it's a 10-minute, even if they're all back-to-back for 20 minutes, just to elect their chair so that we don't spend an hour here doing that.
We're going to spend another 5 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
What was the time again on CRC?
So CRC is May 1st from 5 to 6.
Then what do we do from 6 to 7 before the board meeting?
We're gonna play bingo.
There you go. I'm just wondering if we should have it.
Go get
you know,
coffee.
5:30 or 6:30.
And I have a hard time meeting at 5 o'clock, so I was hoping that we could meet all the committees.
And I think Scott has a hard time too. So if you want to overrule your former committee chair, who's not necessarily the committee chair going forward, you could set it for 5:30 to 6:30.
Okay.
At least for the first one. Let's roll with it.
Okay.
Okay. Extracurricular, when is your first meeting?
I'd like to make him, I would suggest we
not
do
on
it
it.
by May 1st.
Well, that's the issue. Eric is the current chair,
And he's not on the committee.
Right.
so,
So that's why we need to get it rolling here.
yeah.
Because I don't want to wait 2 months to have a meeting.
No.
Right, so you want to do yours on May 1st as well? For extracurricular?
I had forgotten about the CRC committee.
Right. What is the overlap between the two committees?
I'm on
It's
both.
just Kristen.
Yeah, let's pick a different Tuesday.
Okay.
What's
Like, how can
already up on the second Tuesday of the month?
Education and finance and facilities.
Okay. So extracurricular was previously meeting, I think we were doing Thursdays for a while, right, Rob and Eric? Because we were
Yeah.
struggling with everybody else's meetings. So how about if we set an extracurricular meeting for Thursday, May 3rd? And then we'll report back to the full board on what our regular schedule will be.
I'm not on it.
And,
So who else is on it?
I
that the one you
am,
wanted me
but
to
I
come
have
to?
another commitment 4
5
to
o'clock?
7 on first Thursday.
But you're doing extracurricular, Betty?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that group doesn't have pressing needs, so how about Thursday the 10th?
That works better for me.
No.
When?
Pardon?
Thursday the 10th,
What time?
6 o'clock? 6 o'clock on the 10th for extracurricular. One time,
On May 3rd, right?
10th.
May 10th.
Oh,
okay. I would just ask that when the committees get together, and you know your chair, and you know your meeting times going forward, please report that to Lillian. Don't hold the information pending the next board meeting. Give it to Lillian right away as soon as you know. Okay?
you didn't say where.
Didn't say.
Where?
Where? We don't know where.
Dunks? We'll meet at the SAU.
And how do we want to handle facilities splitting from finance?
Rob, you're technically the new chair, right?
No, I'm not.
So, how do you want to handle it?
We need to know a meeting time for facilities, meeting separately from finance. Lisa?
My suggestion would be have that group just meet together on that next regularly scheduled meeting date and decide how to split from there.
Okay.
That would probably work the best.
So, at least we've gotten everyone sort of kick-started. We know that things will be rolling by the next time we get together. Okay. Good. Expectations and investment in committees. This was requested by Scott.
Yeah, so we have debated a couple meetings now about let's have the conversation, whatever the conversation may be, at full board, because committees don't seem to produce. This is my 4th year, I think, and when I first joined, committee meetings were a good 2 to 3 hours, and you got really, really deep and went into a lot, and we also had these really long infomercials at full board meeting about everything they accomplished. So it's like the ditch on the other side of the road. And I know we're struggling wanting to get a lot done, but I think our commitments as board members has to accommodate whatever committees you're signed up for. You not only need to show up to meet quorum, but you have to show up and have read up and be ready and participate, and everybody goes home with homework items. That's, you know, in my head, that's definition of successful. But we haven't set a standard. We've never talked about this out loud. It's just been whatever energy those particular members bring to it. So, you know, are we committed to the committees doing a certain amount? Should our referrals to committee be more defined so we're asking for more specific things? Kind of already been around that bend tonight, but I wanted to open up the dialogue and make sure that we could all come to some agreement on how much time and effort is invested.
I've been here, what, 2.5 years now, or 2 years? And had some incredibly good discussions at the varied committees that I've been on. But I have felt dramatically like the time was wasted because, and I've shared this with the group before, not wasted because of those discussions, but a perfect example is the Education Committee. We just had the same exact discussion tonight, full vote, that we had in the committee meeting. So what's the purpose of the committee? There's no purpose. We meet, my sense is that we meet so that we can say we have a committee and we study things, but when we come back, we rehash everything in open forum, you know, in the full board meeting. And it's, I mean, I could spend the time working, but you know what I mean? It's a hardship to get out and go to those meetings, and I don't know that they're truly useful. I hate to say that because I wish they were, but it's duplication of time and effort.
Nick?
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. It's my 4th year on the board, and my first year I was on 4 committees, and they're useful discussions, and so far as educating board members about certain subjects. And certain committees do have responsibilities that recur every year, like finance and the budget, and talking about the budget and policies. But by and large, I feel the same way. I think we end up rehashing it in the actual board meeting, and we get more done in these long board meetings that we have. Nobody likes, everybody else, oh God, it's midnight. But I feel like we get more done in a long board session where we're all here and we can address important subjects than in just general committees. So,
I don't remember how many years I've done this now, but the one thing that I will say is when we used to do the committee meetings, or back, we'll say 6 or 7 years ago, we would come to these board meetings with this is what we did. We would come with a motion. We would give rationale for the motion, Mr. Felton, and we would basically spell it out. We'd have some question and answer, but typically it wouldn't go on an awful long time, and that's what we did. We'd have a written motion, a written rationale, and we'd come and we'd vote on it, basically. And you'd have some talk about it, but it wasn't like we're doing here.
Winston?
Well, that's why we have first, second reads, is to cut down on the time. And then at the first read, we do nothing, except tell you we have a motion that's going to be read for second read next time. But we are not following the policy of the rationale on these papers. Dr. Fountain is the one who used to insist on that, the ones that have been around a while, that if you're going to do a motion to the board, you have rationale with it. And that will cut down a lot of time. Because these meetings are very important. The committee meetings is where it's done and brought into the board. If we bring it in just with the motions and not give the process we did to get there, yes, you talked about it and you decided to send this motion forward, and you still do your first read, you still do your second read. It shouldn't take that long. But we are making it take long. And I don't think the meetings are ever wasted unless you don't show up.
Kristen, is it the expectation that the board members read the minutes of the committee meetings before we come to the board meeting? Okay. For the committees that you're not on?
They're rarely posted in time.
Okay.
Scott?
So I think where the rubber meets the road is in the individual committee chairs or whoever at the committees take away the homework items to be doing their reading, and so that next committee meeting is the whiteboard's out, so are the markers, the data's up on the screen, and you're digging in. And hopefully a member of administration is there and able to answer the questions on point, and you're going deep and taking it apart so you can get to your motion and your rationale. But a lot of the committee meetings of late have just been like, well, we're all coming in after work, we're tired, and we're coming in kind of seat of our pants, and we know we have some topics to cover, but we're not there, we're not ready yet. So we spend a half-hour warm-up conversation, we're going over old minutes, and then we're kind of glazing over the topic, and that's why the conversation is just a conversation, and we end up having it again at full board. So the committee meetings can work, but we have to invest in them.
Historically, education and also finance met on Tuesday mornings. And, it was during the workday when the administrators were available. It was also earlier when people were fresh. But at that time, the committees consisted of mostly the retired educators who served on the board, because people who work regular jobs are not able to make it at that time. Which is the reason why we tried to shift all of the committee meetings toward the end of the day, but folks are just out of work and not fresh at that time. So there's sort of a balance we need to find. All right, any other commentary on this? Nick?
Yeah, but I'm not going to participate in committee. I didn't sign up for committees this year. I don't plan on participating in committees until we get higher frequency and we have set goals goals for them from the board for things that we need to accomplish.
I think that you're very interested in seeing things happen, and you do ask a lot of questions when the education committee comes to the full board, and it's a symptom of this same problem that, Rob, you felt like you would go to committee, you would hear a lot, and then it would get rediscussed at the full board because the people who were most interested weren't present at the education committee meeting, so we have to rehash it to fill in those who really want to be in the know. And Nick, if you felt like the committee was more productive, you would actually be there and we wouldn't have to rehash it at the full meeting, right?
Well, it's also having some set goals from the board given to the various committees, which is the case when you have finance or when you have policy, but not so much when you have education or when you have some of the other CRC, that sort of thing. Sometimes they get directives for certain public pieces of information, but by and large it's exploring. It's trying to get some information out of administration and having some specific subjects that you talk about. And like I said, they're informative, but there isn't a whole lot of fruit that comes out of them.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like we are mostly talking about the education committee right now. Mostly talking about education. No. Because I've heard a couple of times that policy brings things all of the time that we don't rehash at the full board. Finance does too. They bring a motion, we want to buy a truck, we want to buy it from this person, here's why. We vote on it, it's done. So I think we're mostly talking about education.
Technology.
Extracurricular.
CRC.
Facilities, I mean, to an extent.
So
we'll see if that changes with the new composition of the facilities committee. Nick, would you, I know you said that you don't want to be on any committees.
I don't plan on being on any additional committees until we get the frequency up, because you're not going to accomplish anything meeting once a month. When I first started, it was twice a month, and I still feel like we didn't have the depth, we didn't have the ability to go into the depth that was required. And oftentimes a lot of these subjects overlap multiple committees, like we're talking about the deal with Cutler and Mount Caesar. This is going to float around in the committees. We won't see anything happen from this year.
Easily.
I'm kind of disheartened by the committees, the way that the committees are right now, and I would rather put my time and effort into the board meetings and preparation for the board meetings.
Scott.
So we had a little bit of a good track for a couple of years where committees were creating charters, bringing those charters to the full board and asking for an endorsement. And the way that was sort of born was, you got passionate about a committee, you got on it, the 3-5 people that got together wrote that charter saying, this is what we think the committee's here to do, and these are our goals for the year. Bring it to the full board for a blessing. If you believe then that the committees aren't going anywhere unless the board sets goals for them, maybe that's what we need to do. Maybe we should have an agenda item where every full board meeting we're taking 1 or 2 committees at a time and we're setting the objectives for the year. So Education Committee this year will address the science curriculum, and they will provide at least 3 updates on STEAM, and they will, I don't know, and CRC will deal with this regarding the green sheets at this time, and we can set those standards if that's what we feel would make the committees effective.
I think the fact that we're searching for something to make them effective really speaks to how ineffective they are, and I'm not picking on anybody. I mean, we're searching for a way to make these fruitful. They're not. I'm sorry,
You're right, but it's whatever we invest in it. It's us. It's not, we can all point fingers at each other, but this is, if we don't invest the time in the committees to put in the work into them, then we're going to get this.
I know this last year, some of the those conversations you were talking about, Rob, led to the changes in the teacher evaluation plan and to the new homework policy. Those are 2 specific things I can think of that I don't know if they would have happened if we were just talking about things at the board level.
All right. Well, where were you hoping this would go this evening?
That we would either pick a path to start reinvigorating the committee meetings, or that we come to some conclusion that we have too many committees. We'll go one way or the other, but don't hover on the conversation.
Nick.
I think I'm curious. I've had people tell me this, but I've not verified it personally, that not every school district in New Hampshire, or for that matter, the United States, has a 13-member board with 10 committees. It's not exactly the most common way to do things. I see some head nods. I mean, I know these guys have to show up to all the committee meetings, so they don't like to hear when their entire month is taken up for their evenings. At the same time, I don't know, do you guys prefer showing up fewer days for longer hours or more days for shorter hours? I'd like to hear some input from you guys.
It's really more about the level of information and preparation that the frequency requires, and to use the example of tonight with the education report, and I'm going to pick on Jeremy for a minute because his office is right next to mine, so I know what he works on all day, and so it takes a lot of preparation, and you reported out at both Education Committee and tonight on pretty much the same information, the same amount of time, even additional tonight, because there were a couple of additional things.
5 different topics.
Yeah.
So it's in a 2-week period, I'm spending a full day preparing to report out.
Right.
Because I have to make sure that my commas are right and my papers are good. And
pages are numbered.
Absolutely.
Pages are numbered.
I spend a lot of time trying to make that perfect because it's going to be put out.
Right.
But it is a lot of time that I'm not working with kids or teachers to prepare reports for committees and the board.
Which is part of the job, and so
I was going to say I thought it would have been more.
I don't want to. He's incredibly efficient, and he works a lot from home, as we all do, and it's part of the job. We don't, that's not. So this isn't about us, but I share some of the frustrations and that really defining what the purpose of the committees are, and trying to if in my most of the places I've been, this is the same dilemma, that, you know, you try to work through issues at committee, you try to come forward to the board with just sort of the high level, because that's the work of the committee, but it seems like it seems like it always comes around to, you know, people want, and it's important to have this conversation. So, you know, either everyone has to agree that the committees will do the work and bring the decisions, bring the motions with the rationales, and if there is a vested interest in what's happening at committee, then board members commit to be a part of that, whether they're a standing member of the committee or not. But if there's a topic that's of interest and they want their input heard, then they commit to whatever that is. Maybe it's just a couple meetings while we discuss the homework policy or whatever, so that the work of the full board is more efficient for everybody, both, and the time feels valued in both places, so it's not duplicative. I think that's probably the frustrating part, is that duplicative piece. You know, and it's not a dig; it's part of doing business. But I think this is a great conversation to have, and it's a good problem to have. To be honest, you know, what's the best forum to address our issues? Is it committee? Maybe it's not. Maybe it is full board. We haven't had a really late meeting in a while, so I'm getting a little bit punchy and tired. But if that's the format that works best for the group, then fine.
This conversation was strategically placed at the tail end of the agenda.
Yes, well, you know, and there's, you know, but exactly, and that's the other piece that's my concern, is that, as Lisa articulated in her report, when we get later into the night, you know, some folks do have to go, and we, you know, for various reasons. Everybody's worked a full day, not just the administrators, but most of you here have worked a full day, or you've had lots of other things filling your time. Everybody gets tired. You know, Lisa's not getting any sleep at home right now. So, and so I worry about making sound decisions late into the night, and I worry about having productive discussions when it gets late, because it seems like a lot of those times when we've gone late, those are the things we come back and revisit when we're more fresh, which is duplicative, right? So it's a vicious cycle. But good conversation. Thank you for bringing it up.
Eric.
I think on the committees, I think a lot of what used to make them work well was having, and not necessarily the superintendent or somebody there, but having Dave LaPointe there for facilities, having Tom Cody or you know, Mr. P or somebody there for the extracurricular, having those people, having Lisa Spencer at the meeting or something like that, having those people at the meetings, because they get a lot of the down and dirty, especially when you're just trying to feel things out, and then just having that meeting right before you present it to the board, having the superintendent come at that point, or having some of the some of the higher folks come at that point, and really get the feedback from them before you bring it, and have them get their buy-in. So when you bring it to the board, you can say, this is our rationale. We've talked to the superintendent. She's in agreement, that type of thing. And I think that makes it goes a lot quicker. And I really think that's kind of the way to try to focus. And I know some of the committees you probably can't do that, but some of them you can. You can do that with, you know, and Janelle with the finance or something like that.
So I have a question for the board. Earlier when I said it sounds like we're mostly talking about the education committee, I think almost everyone agreed with me. I see Rob doesn't. So what if we just didn't have an education committee? What's going through my mind is that Jeremy wouldn't have to present the same information twice. Meanwhile, we, the full board, are all over him about we don't ever hear about educational issues. It's one of our major goals for this year. Why don't we ever talk about these things at the full board? We're asking him to present the things at the full board. And we hear saying we never hear about it. We don't talk about it. That's because it's being discussed in committee. So what if we didn't have an education committee? They haven't brought us any motions in quite a long time, months, an entire season. So what if we just didn't have an education committee? Would that help take some of the pressure off? Just throwing that out there.
I looked at Jeremy's thoughts.
Nick?
I think it's more than education. I think there's some other committees there that, I mean, you have the education, you have technology, CRC, extracurricular, you know, these are all committee, from I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, extracurricular often has issues meeting quorum.
True.
They do bring us motions, though.
Yeah. Well, so I kind of feel that way about a lot of these.
CRC does a lot of work behind the scenes, like coming up with the warrant articles in plain English.
It's seasonal.
I have something
Right,
that I
that's
want to
what I'm-
ask the CRC to do next on the agenda also.
So CRC comes up with the warrant articles in plain English. So that's.
But they also go out and rotate and meet with constituents. They meet with selectmen, do their rotation 1 year, and then the following year they go out and meet with staff, right? And then they go back to the selectmen the year after.
Well, that's shifted, but we have been, we're in the midst of building quite a communications playbook. So, maybe there's work that the full board hasn't seen from some of these committees as well.
And are you guys at one of the every other month committees?
Yeah, that was monthly. I don't know when that shifted.
It was last March when the board refreshed and the new rotation was established. So not 2017.
Kristen. This is just, I'm new. Do committees do any work out of meeting? Like, do they do any email exchange, or is that something that would have to be with the RSA?
Yeah.
Okay, just, so we can't shift that at all.
Right. Brian.
I like your idea of no education committee. I like the board taking on that topic, so I support that. My other recommendation might be we put some time limit expectations on when we refer things to committee on the time that we want feedback for. So my concern right now, we're discussing how often committees meet. We have what I consider to be a serious discussion about, our footprint of the district. I would hope that 45 days to see something back from a committee, that's 3 school board meetings, that's potentially 3 committee meetings, more than that. If you decide that there's work to be done, do that. I don't support sending anything to committee just to have it float around and be referred from one committee to the other and we never hear an update to do that. So it may be what we end the night on is, with this topic, is going home, thinking about some objective criteria for us to come back to and discuss on what we can agree of what the expectation is, and if we have to readdress, committee policy on, what the marching orders. I think Eric's, on to something, right? So we meet, we come to the board with a motion. If we don't have a motion, then we continue whatever road you want to go down in your committees until you have something of, value to come back to the board with to do that. So maybe that's just, some food for thought for the group for next committee or next meeting, whatever we're.
All right. Is there any other discussion on this, or would anyone like to pose a motion?
I'd move to suspend the education committee for the time being.
Is there a second?
Second.
So we take the second from Brian. Yeah.
He's had a lot of seconds tonight.
Is there discussion on this?
What's the motion?
The motion is to suspend the education committee for the time being.
Need a 2/3 vote, right?
Technically, yes. Right?
Or are you going to try to pull that on me, but it's not Robert's rules?
No, Neil, you understand the Roberts rules much better than I do, so.
I know.
Lisa?
So you need 2/3 vote.
Okay.
Just to the 2/3 because it's policy? Because the policy doesn't require that the education committee is a standing committee. It just states that the board may have this list of committees, and education is one of them.
I think he's insinuating that.
Oh, because it's not on the agenda.
Because it's not on the agenda.
Sorry.
I'm good with it not being.
Thanks.
My bad for not, apologize.
You're bad for what?
Not thinking of that
Oh,
when
you
I made
can
my
do
motion.
it, you can do it anyway. All I'm saying is it needs a 2/3 vote to go through.
You're arguing with somebody apologizing to you?
I get that a lot.
We have a page and a half agenda, and we're adding items.
All right, so, 2/3 then. Can you do roll call for
I
this?
just have a
Kristen, yeah.
So
I'm
that's
sorry.
suspending education/technology committee because it's one committee.
Yes.
So technology was fully absorbed into education, so it's
So
just
we
the
don't have a
education.
On the
technology committee either.
committee list, it's listed as education and technology.
Kristen,
We're going backwards.
Yes.
We
Win.
tried that. I'm voting no. This is the most ridiculous motion I've heard. We worked for years to get an education committee, and now we're abandoning it.
Neil,
No.
Nick,
Sure.
Brian,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Betty,
No.
Scott,
No.
Lisa.
Yes.
All right. Well, you don't. It's not 2/3. It's 5.690 yes, 4.309 no.
Oh, it fails.
It failed because we didn't have 2/3. Yep.
5.69 yes.
Do you want to put it on the agenda for the next meeting?
To
Would be a-
4.309.
It would need to be a vote to reconsider.
No, that's right.
5.690.
What's next?
All right, one second.
4.309. Yeah.
So, quotes on the environmental and structural study on Troy Elementary. Has that been initiated yet?
Dave's done some, made some contacts. So with respect to the first, the environmental and ground study work, looks like probably about $4,500 from the different folks he's talked to. He has not been able to obtain any quotes yet on the structural piece. He's got some contacts, but he hasn't gotten anything back yet.
That's incredibly reasonable for core testing.
Very reasonable.
Yeah,
environment.
that's what he said too, so.
Hopefully it's a good contact.
I think it's
Well,
been
he
from.
felt confident about the number. It was
He did,
pretty
yeah,
low.
and I think he's gotten that from more, in that ballpark from more than one at this point, so.
Surprised.
Thanks.
All right.
When can we expect for him to move forward with seeking some proposals?
Well, those, they're quotes right now, so.
Yeah, when are we expecting them to hire someone?
I believe the motion of the board was just to obtain the quotes.
Yep.
So,
I'd like to make a motion that we direct Superintendent Witt to direct the staff under her, I'm trying to be politically correct here, to follow through with that, with the environmental testing at the Troy School.
And structural.
Oh, we don't even have the quotes yet.
We don't have a quote on the structural, but Rob, it was only, that was only for the.
That's only for the soil testing.
Brian, again.
Okay. Did you say that was a motion?
Yes, and I have a question on, because I'm getting tired, I have a question on my own motion. Somebody wants.
You getting in a fight with yourself?
Yes,
First, who was the second?
I need to argue with myself.
Who was the second?
Brian was
Second,
the
Jeremy.
second. And I think I hear Neil thinking over there that we need a 2/3 vote because this wasn't on the agenda.
Yes.
No, it is on the agenda.
It is, right?
Oh, technically,
Oh, it does say quote, excuse me, you need 2/3. But I'll help you out and vote with you.
All right, Nick.
where are we getting the money?
we still, I mean, we have some lines where we can look to balance, transfer.
You know, we're gonna have a
And we do
$1 million
definitely
surplus,
have
Nick.
some lines within the
I
facilities
was gonna
budget
say,
itself.
we
Not the way
have
we're
that
spending
cash
it.
within the
We do.
facilities. Okay,
Yep,
Thank you, Janelle.
you're welcome.
I guess I'll vote for my own motion then.
All right, any other discussion on this? All in favor of having Superintendent Witt encourage her?
You can
Encourage
just
the
tell me
staff
to do it, and then I'll just delegate it
Yes.
to
Okay.
whoever I deem appropriate, David.
All in favor of having Superintendent Witt move forward on the environmental portion of the studies on the Troy school campus?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And abstentions? Good, and then we'll follow up next week, or 2 weeks on that. Last thing, discussion, newsletter copy for towns. So quite often, I get the Troy Town News, and I know the Troy Town News appreciates having a little bit of copy from the school board. So if I'm writing that for Troy, is there somebody writing it for Fitzwilliam, and then there's somebody else writing it for Gilsum? Maybe it would be a good idea for us to assign the CRC to write newsletter copy that we can each publish in our respective town newsletters. So we're all saying the same thing. Because I feel like it's good for folks in the district to be getting a consistent message. So this is discussion. How do we feel about that? Betty?
I can ask again, but a few years ago I asked the Swansea folks, and they didn't want school stuff in their town newsletter. They do it once a year, and they feel it's full of town news. But like I said, it was a few years ago, so I could see if they've changed their minds.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm regularly asked. I've been asked every year I've been on the board to have a small editorial in our Roxbury newsletter that comes out annually. So we do something kind of like that.
Yeah.
But it's from the perspective of me as a board member.
Right. Would you be opposed to having something that's sort of roughed in by the CRC and you could add your own flavor to it?
I don't know. I think the town likes to hear from its own representatives, from their perspective, from not necessarily from the board, which may not share my perspective of what I see is what's best for our town. So you may get some pushback like that from the respective towns.
Any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, Neil was first.
Sorry, Neil, I didn't see you.
I've been writing one, things and thoughts from the school district for about 4 years. First line says, opinion of Neil Moriarty, not necessarily the opinion of the school board. If you guys want to try to put one in there, I can ask to see if you can get some space, but normally they would let you put in an article if you asked.
So, Neil, are you saying that even if there was copy provided by the CRC, you would still write your own article anyway?
Yeah, I will not let you have my article, you're right.
Okay.
Because it says things and thoughts.
Okay. All right.
If you want me to put something in my article, yes, you can send that to me, one item. I wouldn't mind doing that, but if you want me to check with the editors, I will see if you can put your own in there.
Scott?
I like the idea, but I do think it's a clunky thing to ask a committee to do, any committee, because you're asking 4 people to sit around a screen and wordsmith news copy. It's really something that one person would write, and then maybe there's some team that kind of puts some polish and blessing on it, but it's really, so I wonder if maybe it should be either coming from administration or coming from you as a board chair, and then we're kind of finding some way to bless it in group.
Okay. All right.
Like, for instance, I put the results of the vote in, I get the warrant put in there, stuff like that, besides the.
Yeah. Okay, well, it was just a thought. It sounds like it's not
By
terribly
the way, if you
popular
want
right
something
now.
in there, it's gotta be here by the 10th.
Ours is the 15th.
All right.
The town.
Well, thank you, everyone, for your input on that. Moving on to the consent agenda, we need a motion on the March 27th minutes, please.
Motion to approve as written.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Wait. Was this March 27th?
Yeah.
I should be listed as present.
Ooh.
President?
Present. As being here.
But you were volunteering.
Thank you.
All right, any other changes? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Moving on to the April 3rd minutes.
Motion to approve as written.
You haven't even read them, have you?
I did.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, and Kristen?
I had a question, and I may have just been remembering this incorrectly. On the number 6, it says, and Moriarty would add a friendly amendment and a limit to the motion about the gate receipts for the hockey team. Is it for the 2018-2019 season that we voted on?
No,
I
it's
thought it was
the past season.
So that should be changed to 2017-2018.
Yep. Very good catch.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? And it looks like we have some non-public minutes to approve from April 3rd. First non-public was at 10:20. Do I have a motion on that?
So moved.
What are you doing?
Second.
Exercising?
All in favor?
Aye.
Sorry, I didn't ask for discussion.
No, who was the motion?
All right,
Staying.
thank you.
Lisa,
Jeremy, did
you
you-
could just slow down for just a second so we can catch up? So Nick abstained from that?
He did.
Nick abstained, yeah.
Thank you. I don't want to miss it.
Yep.
They would have already been sealed at the last meeting.
The next set of minutes is from 10:30 p.m. We have had another late meeting. It was this one.
You were sick.
It's 10:49 right now.
Yeah. This isn't a real late meeting. The late ones were like 1 a.m.
It's not.
Yes,
Well,
it is.
see, one of the things about
That clock hasn't been
pennies will make this worse.
Clock is wrong?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No wonder everybody was looking at me funny when I didn't.
It's 10:50.
No,
It's
it's
10:50.
It's right.
Oh, it just the little hand looks like the other.
Oh.
It's because of the light.
So moved.
I'm reading it backwards. And who's the second, please? For the 10:30
Second.
p.m. non-public? Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And abstention?
Staying.
Very good. Manifest?
I'd like to move the manifest in the amount of $1,190,366.90.
Any discussion on, oh, I'm sorry, who's the second, please?
Second.
That was Rob. And any discussion?
Stay?
Do we have the money?
You figured you'll need it.
Confidently say yes.
All in
Someone's gotta
favor?
replace me.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right. Next meeting's agenda, I wrote down coffee,
Public left, everybody left.
education committee, potential motion to reconsider, environmental and structural study quote update. For our overview, how about a fine arts overview? Or does someone have a different idea for the overview presentation? Anything else for next meeting's agenda?
There was a lot of items talked about the last one, and I thought you were spacing it out between
Oh, I
this
know it
week and
was.
2 weeks from now.
Yes, there was one, safety, did you say safety review? We were supposed to get that.
There was no
Nothing
update.
to report, so it'll go on next time too. Yeah.
Oh, never mind.
We have our non-meeting at 6 p.m. prior.
Yes, we do.
That's
These just get longer.
Wait, are there committee meetings?
Oh, there's a
before that
committee
now?
meeting.
There's a
Remember,
potential
we're meeting in
CRC.
Troy.
So you could go from 5 to 9.
Troy at 6.
That's right. CRC
Did
would be
5:30.
overlapping with the non-meeting.
What is
Isn't
the
there-
That's
did
probably why she said
5:30
5 to 6
CRC.
negotiation strategy.
Isn't there a school tour that time too?
Yeah, why did the school tour for that get moved as well?
No,
I
there's
don't
no
know.
school
I
tour that
wasn't
night.
involved
There's
with the
6:30 to
school tour.
7,
There's one scheduled for May
May something.
May 14th or 17th. I did email Karen Wheeler, though. Neither David or I are available that night. So I did email her to try to potentially change that.
And she may not be the chair of the facilities portion any longer.
Right. So that the one that's on the next one that's on the calendar will need to move because I think the intent was to look at some of the pieces from the reports, and David's the best poised to do that.
All right. When?
The Cheshire Career Center is having a Friends meeting tomorrow night, and a supper at Cheshire Career Center. And I got an invitation to go to it, but Neil didn't, and we're both going to try and go.
Wedding crashes?
I don't want to miss my annual. This is the annual meeting for the Cheshire Career Center. Anybody, I don't know if everybody can go, but they never denied anybody yet.
Right. So do we need to do something to get Neil added to the list of invitees?
I think you have to call Linda Prue.
I can do that.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Get your in.
Your name is Lisa, isn't it?
So he's got his in.
Lisa Danley's the director.
Oh. I was going to give that lady
Yes,
help.
she is.
Yeah, that's why you didn't get
Anything
invited.
else for next meeting's agenda?
Yeah, probably already did it, right?
What was our 3 subjects we're going to tackle this year?
Education, which is
Education.
always going to be on there,
Yeah.
and because Jeremy is doing his reporting.
Mm-hmm.
And the capital improvement plan
Mm-hmm.
and safety. There's no update on safety today, but it will go on every agenda that there is an update.
Just want to make sure those 3 items are on each week.
All right, second public comments. Do we have anyone? Audience.
You're tired of them all out.
We chased them all off.
Non-public?
Yeah, under C.
Yeah, so there's one non-public.
Yeah, we just gotta let these guys break down.
We'll take a break, whatever time you guys need to break down.